So anyway, boys, what are we talking about?
We were going to do election stuff, aren't we?
I guess. What do you figure? What you take?
Are we recording?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you have
Bold predictions. What did we say? 343 is the new seat total.
343?
Was it 343 or 344? 343 is an odd number.
343, okay.
Oh, it's not 338 anymore?
No. As of the 28th, it will be 343.
Oh, man. They're going to have to change the website name.
Yeah, that's what Steve said.
Wow. I'm so used to that. That's actually a benchmark number.
Yeah.
Rewinding. So Virginia suggested that we say we're Radio Free Ortona. And for those of you who don't know, why we call ourselves that.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So
All right.
just a little bit of context. So the Radio Free Europe.
Rip off. or you were going to say homage.
Context, people probably get.
Yeah.
The Ortona bit, I mean, that's personal to the three of us because that's a battle honor of our regiment, the Loyal Edmonton Regiment, and it actually shows up in a number of places in the city. The most obvious is the Ortona Armories downtown, out of which, I don't know if they still operate there, but the Ortona Gymnastics Club.
I don't think they do. I believe that's all an arts building now, arts commune now.
Interesting.
There is also the Ortona Villa Senior Citizens Home.
That's right. Yes.
But yeah, I find the fact that the old Ortona Armories is now an arts commune is very ironic.
I went there, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just said, hey, this is, this building used to be a military building. I'm kind of an amateur historian. Would you mind if I look around? And there was one guy there. It was a Saturday. He said, yeah, come on in. And the building has been heavily changed. There was a small kind of very internal drill
Parade square?
Yeah, not much more than, say, a small church community hall on the
Right.
second floor. And that's largely filled with, broke up into studio space, whatnot. But there's one area where there was some offices, and you can still clearly see the military tile.
Oh,
It's the same tile that you would
yeah.
find on the buildings like Mullen Block and Mackenzie Block and Spall Block, like the big C-shaped buildings.
Yeah.
It still had that tile and the trimmer on the doors. Like you can definitely tell it was renovated military style.
Yeah.
My understanding is that the building originally belonged to the Hudson's Bay Company.
Oh, really?
And it was where they used to store. There was a stables where the parking lot is now, and they used to do deliveries by horse and wagon
Right.
through the city, and that's where they stored their wagons and their tack and it was a minor cross-dock warehouse for
Right, yeah.
goods and delivery would be stored there. They would have to go first thing and whatnot. So that's what the original purpose of the building was, and then the military acquired it. Shortly after Prince of Wales reverted to
The city?
the city
Right.
in exchange for the land that would become Canada Place. They did a swap with the federal government.
Oh.
And while the rest of the reserve community went up to Griesbach for a short time, the LERs were in the Ortona Armory instead. Now, why that decision was made, I don't know. But at any rate, they felt that there was a persistent belief within the military, which is still there today, that a reserve armory should always be located in the community. The phrase you'll find in official documentation is footprint in the community.
Right.
That the idea is that you want your reserve building embedded, whereas you want regular force facilities away from the population. And
Because those guys are insane.
that's not written down anywhere, but I definitely get that sense. Like,
You also need a bigger training area for Reg Force.
and you don't. There's always been an aloofness between the regular force and the civilian world. There's always been a sense of desiring a separation, like it's two solitudes sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they've always sought to preserve that, whereas they felt the opposite about the reserve, that the reserve, because it had a foot in both camps, had to be that link between the military community and the civilian community. So they wanted it in, like, your typical model would be something like Mowata in Calgary, or the classic is Moss Park Armories in Toronto, where it's in the community. Yeah. Although that's not really important anymore. I'd say at least after the 1980s.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's not a factor anymore, but that old mentality still exists. Right?
Well, like Minto in Winnipeg is in a residential neighborhood, as was
Yep.
I can't remember the name of the armory, but the Fort Garry Horses Armory was
Yep.
also in a residential neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, that's the pattern that it was. So they deliberately. So that might have been a factor of it. Greaseball was way out.
Yeah,
Like Greaseball was outside of the city back then, like barely. Like it is probably the same relationship to the city that
yeah.
Navajo
I
has
think the
now.
city, other than Clairview, well, because when
Yeah.
they moved out early '70s, they moved to
Yeah,
like, most of
yeah.
the reserves moved to Greaseball.
Yeah.
right. So trying to think, like '78, like
Yeah.
Clairview was the far north. The city ended
Yeah,
the
yeah.
north end of Clairview, and so
Yeah.
like Greaseball, the south end of Greaseball being 137th Ave, probably was the end of the city at that point.
Yeah.
In that area, right?
So they felt maybe the LARs still had some ability to control their own destiny,
yeah,
and so perhaps they said no, we still want to be in the center of the community. So maybe they tried that, but then found that the building was too limited. I remember.
well, I mean, it took moving to Jefferson before we realized how good we had it at Greaseball, right? Like,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes,
despite,
exactly.
Despite
Same
all the
problems.
decentralized,
Yeah.
stores was 2 doors down from the armory, and
Yeah.
headquarters was 2 blocks away.
But but that was a good thing.
And,
In retrospect, that was a good thing.
that was a good thing, and there was
back 40.
40 acres, literally 40 acres.
Yeah.
You could run around on with guns
Yeah.
because it was
Yeah.
defense. It was a D&D.
We
thing.
could do walkthrough, talk through of whatever we needed, be it
Yeah.
an ambush, be it relief in place, be
Yeah.
it a withdrawal, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
We had that room.
Yeah.
We could go set up tents. I remember we used to do our own winter indocks. We do like our own kind of winter, like just if the whole intent is just to practice tent drills.
Yeah.
We do an exercise in the back 40.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the more experienced guys, no, I'm not coming out for that. But for the recruits who had never been in overnight in an Arctic tent before, it was a perfect controlled environment.
yeah.
Because if something went wrong, you had heated facilities, immediately available.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a real blessing. And I think I remember Keith Mundorf telling me that he remembered parading in Ortona, and he said, yeah, it was very limited.
Yeah.
You were always cramped, cheek by jowl.
Yeah,
Not
his
enough
brother
room for
Donnie
stores.
had a lot of stories about that too, right? Being down
Donnie had plenty of stories about all sorts of things.
Yeah. But,
Anyways, that's why we got a radio-free digression, folks.
And there you go. We just totally digressed.
but yeah,
But yeah, so
the Battle of Ortona
Yeah,
Battle of
and the
Ortona.
LERs. And screw all you guys in the C4th and the PPCLI. I mean, we're taking it.
Well, the C-Force, they get half of it.
Yeah.
When the Royals try and fit their way into it, we have the Ortona toast. Like,
The Royals to do this?
yes, the Royal Canadian Regiment has this tradition called.
Even there?
Yeah, I know. They weren't even in the same brigade.
Like the Patricians were there.
Well, they were adjacent.
Yeah.
They were on the flank
And then one of their companies pushed in, I think, on like
at
the
the
last
end.
hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were
when it was over.
they were there.
Yeah. Whereas the Royals,
They were in the area. They were in the same area
yeah,
code.
the Royals have a tradition called the Ortona toast, which was done, I guess, Christmas. I think it's connected to the Christmas time,
right.
where they had I guess their drink as some kind of rum or rum variation.
Right.
Some royal someday might hear this and like, no, he's got it all wrong, but whatever. Where they toasted, they had their regimental day or Christmas or something to this effect on the outskirts of Ortona, but all they had was coffee mugs. So I guess some of the command element, whatever, toasted the regiment in coffee mugs because they drank their booze out of coffee mugs. That's what they had. And so to this day, on that day, into the modern current era, on the anniversary of that day, they have their booze in porcelain coffee mugs, and they call it the Ortona toast. And this is a tradition of the Royal Canadian Regiment.
No, I think they were part of the drive for Ortona, but they weren't part of clearing the city. That's us and the C4s.
Yeah,
Us.
almost exclusively. Yeah, because like you and I were there.
Well, he's almost old enough. I mean,
I knew that was. I knew that was coming. I knew it.
All right.
Okay, election.
Election
Bold
2025.
predictions. Let's start with that. Trent.
bold prediction.
I don't even know who I want to vote for if I want to vote.
Yeah, but who do you think's gonna win?
I think Carney.
By how many? How many? Majority, minority?
Oh, I think I don't know enough to base that on. I really don't. I suspect he could pull off, based on some polling. I suspect he could pull off. Most of the polls, I think, actually indicate a liberal majority for Carney. But polls have been so all over the place in the last
Yes.
10 years that I don't know. I think there's a good chance it's a minority. I don't like Pierre's chances.
I think he's gonna get a small majority. Say 25 seats.
Pierre.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, I do.
Notwithstanding everything we've discussed in the last week by text.
Yeah. Well, I started looking into it further from that. Trying to again. Would you allow me to delve into the conspiratorial?
Can we stop you?
Yes, that's a real question.
I don't. If I was a third party, whose capital city started with the words Beijing, I don't know if I would find it
BEI.
Beijing.
Oh, okay.
Start and finish.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if
For some reason I was thinking Europe for a minute.
I don't
It's not
know
W.
if it would be advisable to interfere in this one. I think there's too much to lose because I think there's too much American attention on this election. And I don't know if I would want to jeopardize my money laundering networks in Canada by risking overt interference in that. So maybe I think if I was going to interfere, I'd maybe lay low. Now, will the Indians and the Russians also feel that way? I don't know. I don't know what side the Indians and the Russians would prefer to be honest.
I don't know.
And they don't have the same. They don't have the same. How would you say?
Penetration.
Skin in the game.
Oh,
that say China
India
does.
certainly doesn't. I'm kind of surprised to hear India being mentioned in this context. Russia for sure. Russia has, its cyber warfare has been massive. Its propaganda warfare has been massive. Its disruption has
absolutely.
been massive, and it's just an agent of
Absolutely.
chaos for the sake of being an agent of chaos.
And I think that is exactly that. That's exactly it. Russia, I don't think really cares what government is in Ottawa. They just want chaos. They want to create confusion, discord, no matter who's in. So I don't think
Yeah.
they really have. They really don't care who's involved, or I should say, they really don't care who is in cabinet. But they're going to continue trying to sow chaos and discord
Well,
amongst the population. Let's put it that way.
What I see by far, like of all the parties named so far, Russia is there, and it's more cultural and social.
Mm-hmm.
It's not political per se. It is effectively responsible for leveraging social media and the internet
Mm-hmm.
and creating the polarization that we see these days.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the key form of foreign interference.
Right,
is
and that's-
media and internet manipulation.
And
But
that's
like all players.
And that's across the board in all Western democracies, European
Yep.
and North American,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's what they're doing,
Yeah.
right? And that's what really pisses me off about, both sides,
Mm-hmm.
both ends of the spectrum, the new left, woke, whatever we're going to call it, and the MAGA / Canadian MAGA,
Yeah.
all that shit. It's like, sometimes it's like, do you fucking hear yourselves? Mm-hmm. And also, like, you're just a patsy. You realize that, for just bullshit disinformation. To the extent that now we've got measles outbreaks. I'm like, for fuck's sake, people, now we're living 100 years ago, right? Because people, and I saw a great meme this week, and it's like, oh yeah, people worry about, vaccines having micro tracking devices in them, when they're literally carrying around
their cell phone.
a tracking device in their
like-
pocket where they're getting all this fucking
Where they're
bullshit
getting this stuff
right?
from. Yeah.
At some point, I revert to our good faith episode, right? And that's what is absolutely missing all the time. You know, it bothers me whenever anyone goes fake news, when everyone says, you know, that there's nothing behind that, right? You know, this assumption that anything that anyone else says,
Or
that
so
is
anything I don't
counter-
agree with. Yeah.
is you know, it's again conspiratorial, it's manipulative, it's, you know, there's and I'm like, at some point, listen, we got to have something to work with, right? And that's why I keep pulling back to, you know, good faith on the one hand and reasonable conversation.
I think that will come back. It's just going to take time.
Well, and that's so one of the reasons I think Carney's doing well is he's not Justin, right? That's the biggest
That's
thing.
the number one thing.
He's not
Yes.
Justin,
Yeah.
and he's not Pierre. He's not conservative, but he's, you know, and so Justin was really bad at that.
What's that?
Right? There was no good faith in anything he did. Right? Like, I did not trust a word that came out of his mouth because it was all just palaver. It was
And it was all word salad.
right?
It was all platitude. And also the way people felt about Justin, and I'm going to say Eastern Canada, felt about Justin. I'll be more specific. The way Toronto and Montreal felt about Justin in 2017 is very different than the way they felt about him in January of 2025.
Oh,
In
absolutely.
2017, they loved him.
Yep.
They loved that word salad. They loved those platitudes.
Oh yeah, because he
It's
was
just
coming out
that-
saying all the right things. You know, like, what did he say? Like, day one on the bus with Peter Mansbridge.
Sunny
You know,
days.
why do you have a cabinet half
Because it's
women? Because it's
2016.
2015, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Fuck off.
But
right?
they loved it. They loved
Absolutely.
it.
Right. So it was the type of soundbite that made sense at the time, you know, and he stood out in the world as this progressive,
Yeah.
you know, but then turned out over time just less, you know, just
Well, the times moved on and he didn't, I think.
well,
Well,
the veneer of substance just rubbed off of him, right? It just every single thing. There was no integrity to the guy. There was no substance to the guy. It was just platitude after bullshit after mumbling.
Well, that's
after-
why I say times moved on and he didn't, right? Like, because he was always the platitude guy. He was always the pablum guy. He was always
And I will say
say
that
something that sounds nice and is non-committal
he
about
didn't
anything.
deliver. He did do what he did deliver, of course, alienated a lot of people because it hurt a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially working class. But it wasn't enough for the white collar managerial class who nominally supported those ideas. He really didn't deliver on electoral reform.
No, at all.
He was
No, that is one of his biggest hypocrisies.
well, I think once they discovered that, my understanding is that once it got into committee and all three parties saw that it was going to lead to perpetual minority governments,
Yeah.
nobody wanted it. Not the Conservatives, not the Liberals, not the NDP. Nobody wanted perpetual minority governments. I think they're fine.
Yeah.
I think they're great.
I like ineffective government. I like a government that's almost perpetually paralyzed. Whereas if you see government as an active problem solver, that can be problematic.
Yeah.
So I think that died. But it did alienate a lot of his constituency. He did not deliver on gun control. They wanted him, and he talked a great game during the campaign. They wanted, like, they thought, finally, we got a man of action, not a man of action, we got a man of conviction who's going to prohibit firearms. And he never did. He did a couple of order and councils, but he
Well,
never.
not to hear you two talk about it.
Well, we
they-
consider it a grave threat, but
They've done a bunch of ordering councils.
I'm
but,
not.
yeah.
It's not the same as legislation.
They did the one piece of legislation, C-24 or C-42? I can't.
But if I'm Heidi Rathjen, he didn't go far enough.
Yeah, Heidi, yeah, those people
He
want-
did not completely prohibit firearms and render the population defenseless. That was the goal, and he fell short. There were a variety of other, like his radical environmentalist fringe, the kind of people that this Stellan
Shut down,
Gibault kind of type guys.
Shut down Energy East. Shut down.
Yeah, he didn't. I mean, he put Trans Mountain through. Now, of course, if someone who wants economic independence for Canada, it's a lose-lose for him. If you wanted economic independence for Canada, you're really upset because you delayed for so long. It cost over $20 billion. It was not enough. Yet, if you're on the other side with a radical environmentalist camp, you're angry that it happened at all. So he kind of found a way to alienate both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, but I mean, once you get into the radical environmentalist camp, I mean, there's a bunch of hypocrites, anyways, right? Because they're always coming at Alberta for
that's
for
easy
dirty
for
oil.
you to say from a radical right wing perspective. But I'm a little bit more of a moderate than you, Trent, and I'm actually able to say that some good things come out of the left. Holy Jesus!
They're not the left.
For those of you who can't see this, Trent's sitting here in a cowboy hat with a Ronald Reagan T-shirt on.
Yeah.
Blood dripping from his mouth. I actually had that T-shirt.
That would be awesome.
I bought that in London in '84.
That would be awesome. I should get one like that with Stéphane Gibault. Blood dripping. The picture where he's being arrested.
Oh yeah.
His mugshot, or where he's in the prison, or he's in the Greenpeace coveralls,
Right.
and he's being led away in cuffs, and he's got that demonic look on his face. Yeah, I should get that Photoshop so blood is dripping out of his mouth, and like there's dead children on the floor in front of him.
Yeah.
I mean, so rewinding to wherever we started this conversation, but he's
a big boost for Carney is that he's not Trudeau.
He's not Trudeau, and he's not Pierre. And again, Pierre, from my point of view, I just find, and we've talked about this in numerous forums across numerous discussion points, he's too tied in with the Canadian MAGA, right? Just all those extreme elements. And like the other post I keep seeing, it's come up 2 or 3 times, is, anytime I'm wondering about, picking between two sides, I look at the one that's got Nazis, right? And if it's got Nazis, I probably don't support that.
Yeah,
right?
but Nazi's anyone, like for most people, Nazi is anyone I don't like.
No, I get that, right? I absolutely get that.
It's almost that Nazis become a meaningless word now.
Well, it has, and so have the terms authoritarian, and they've become so diluted.
Yeah, yeah.
To the extent that, any voice that's out there right now kind of pointing to what Trump is doing down in the States and kind of going, okay, we've seen this playbook before, people, right? When I say authoritarian, I mean it this time, right?
Do you think Trump is more authoritarian than Trudeau?
Yeah.
How so?
I think the answer to that question is in the future.
So that he just hasn't manifested it yet.
There's a lot of people pointing to kind of analyzing the whole tariff concept right now. And it's not about tariffs. It's not about the economy. As far as he's concerned, the economy can go fuck itself, right? So I've heard it from 2 different streams. One is he's creating an economic crisis, which he can leverage at some point into just,
police state, shut it down, or not police state,
assuming more and more control over things. So that there's that side of it. The other angle I've heard is that by doing this, he gets more and more big corporations coming to him, begging for, basically pledging their loyalty to him, right? So now he's got control over this big corporation. They're going to do what he wants, in return for some
I don't think
better
that's
prosperity.
happening. Like big corporations coming to him like hat in hand or whatever. I think most big.
So far, they're all speaking out against it.
I've got your book.
No, but,
don't leave without that book.
But I think most corporate entities these days are like they're just sitting on their money and sitting on their pocketbooks for the
Can I
next
say
till the end of
something
this
really
term to see
provocative?
what comes up after.
We should let Steve finish the sentence for
I
once.
thought you did.
No,
You
I was
were
in the
still
middle
talking.
of it when you started talking.
Holy jeez. I'm a bad guy. Okay, go on.
You really need to get that Adderall.
It's okay. We still love you.
No, but yeah, like I think most big corporations are fundamentally just sitting on their hands.
Wait and see
till the end of this term, see what comes out of this.
To the end
Like-
of this term?
Or
Well,
you mean
till
like
at least the midterms, right? Because
okay.
right, but even till the end of his term, it's 4 years. In a
in the big scheme of things,
in the big
you can
scheme,
wait.
it's economically damaging and it is damaging to the profitability of the corporations, but the unpredictability is more damaging, right? If your economic realities are dependent on the whims of one man with a bunch of people who can't math advising him,
Or English?
or English, yeah, or can't math or English, but the I saw a video this morning, and I'm sorry, Patty, it was on CBC's channel, but they have some pretty good explaining videos.
Okay.
About how they came up with their tariff rates for all 180 countries that they're imposing tariffs on, right? And it was literally that they said, "Oh, well, these are the tariffs these countries are
Putting on our goods, so
putting on
we'll
our
do
goods.
exact reciprocal.
No, they did reciprocal minus but divided by 2 because they're being nice. Okay, but in their view, a tariff is our net imports, or sorry, our net imports from their company minus our net exports to
Right.
that country. Divide those or subtract one from the other, and that is the tariff that company is imposing on you. It's not. It's a trade deficit.
Country.
Right, yeah. They're confusing tariff and trade barriers with trade deficits.
Well, and they're also not doing
Yeah.
it per capita, as we've previously discussed.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
by industry either.
But no, literally, it was, and so they came out with a formula, and so they released this formula. And it's not super complicated, but it's a kind of a complicated looking formula. And then the guy pointed out, well, this one is, and then the variables like that they were dividing by is like, well, this is actually 4 times 0.25, which is 1. So this entire half of the formula just disappears because 1. So you're multiplying this 1 times this other number, which is, and guess what? The bottom number is trade deficit and or total imports, and the other one's total exports. And so it's the same thing. So they're just literally subtracting.
Was that on a majority of the cases?
It's all of them.
Or all of them.
This is
okay.
the formula they said they use for everybody.
Yeah, but did it come out to 1 for like all? Like, was it incredibly reductive
Yeah,
for
no, 'cause-
all of the
yeah.
countries, or just a few that CBC?
No,
had picked?
because what this number of 4 and 1, because it was these variables were like they were variables that they figured applied to the American people as like ability, desire for like economic stability and resist or
resilience.
no, their willingness to accept price increases, which is like the 0.25,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes.
that was a constant for all countries,
Okay.
right? So that always was 1 for everybody because
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was an American.
Yeah. It's a
population.
domestic concern.
Yeah.
Whatever you may want to achieve in terms of trade deficits,
Yeah.
your primary constraint
Yeah.
is what is the willingness of the American people to bear.
Yeah. So it was literally for every country. It was like imports minus exports, and then that number was turned into a percentage, and then
Well, I heard actually it was even more basic than that. It was
but it was
divide the higher number by the smaller number, and that was the rate they came up with. And I saw one
Yeah, no, that- no, yeah,
one
yeah.
journalist was joking about this, saying they pointed that out.
actually
and,
I think they went the other way. They divided the smaller number by the higher number, and then that was the percentage. But
yeah,
because that would give you a decimal, and then the first numbers of that decimal was the percentage they were using, right? Like so.
what one journalist was joking, and they pointed this out to the press secretary. The press secretary came back with a mathematical formula that included a couple of Greek
Yeah, no, they had all
mathematical
had-
things that negated each other and effectively came out to exactly what you just described.
Yeah,
Again.
those are the variables.
Right?
Yeah. So the and then the video goes on further to describe that there's a few countries in there that the U.S. actually has trade surpluses with, and they still put 10% tariffs on them because fuck them.
Yeah, because fuck them, yeah.
Because there's no sense about this thing. Anyways, reeling this back in,
Yeah.
we got on this tangent
Yeah, okay, yeah. So you want to go back
because
to currently?
we're talking about authoritarianism
Okay,
and
or how
just
labels are being misused.
labels misused. So it's like crying wolf, right? We've
Actually, I want to go back to your thing about
Trump being more authoritarian.
No.
than,
Before we got off on are Nazis really Nazis? So instead of saying Nazi, I'll say white supremacists.
Sure.
Because white supremacists usually vote. They're not usually voting Democrat, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
Or they're not usually voting Liberal. So they're yes.
I would think probably.
Okay. So if the Conservatives have a policy you agree with, say like lessening interprovincial trade barriers,
Yes.
right? You would agree with? I think that's a thing you would think is good,
Yes.
right? Okay.
But I think everyone's looking at that now.
No one's going to do anything.
Probably not.
No one will touch it.
Not even Polyev if you get
I've always been
No.
surprised that those, like when I first heard of the concept of interprovincial trade barriers, I'm like, what the fuck? Like what, why? Why would such a thing even exist? Now, and the only way I've really seen it manifest itself is when a buddy of mine's brother was going to school in Montreal. He was going to McGill. And every summer he'd drive home, passing through Ontario and Quebec, loading up the back of this Volvo station wagon with all these amazing beers when all we had was Molson Canadian Labatt's Blue and and extra old stock. Right? and if
I
you
can't believe you forgot vitamin P, motherfucker.
Okay, there was Lethbridge Pill, Black Label, and if you went to the Labatt store, you can buy Labatt's 50 direct. But that was it.
Well, there was two main. There are two main ways that these interprovincial barriers manifest that are immediately noticeable to virtually everyone. One is alcohol, and the other is supply management.
Yeah.
But there's and they kind of stem from that. But if you will allow me to descend into gross shorthand.
No, shut up. I got to go back to my point that we already digressed from.
No,
Yeah. Okay, so Trent agrees with bringing down interprovincial barriers. Okay.
Just it's a policy.
Oh, okay.
Not that it's a policy you agree with, and maybe it's worth voting for, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, and so a lot of people, and there's perhaps more than one policy that you agree with,
Yeah.
right? And this party, as far as I can tell,
Which party?
the Conservatives,
Okay.
because that's the one the white supremacists support, and Trent doesn't want to vote for it because the white supremacists
Because of white
support it,
supremacists.
right? So the only reason, I'm just trying to say that the party has a platform. Say you subscribe or you support multiple aspects of the platform: trade barriers, reduce gun control, energy infrastructure, stuff like that. That maybe you support, right? So multiple things that you support.
Yes.
Now the fact that this fringe group of people
That he panders to.
does he? I don't see him pander to.
Okay, first of all, what fringe and what
I'm just saying. He said. I'm saying white supremacists.
Okay, so he's pandering to white supremacists.
Anti-vax, fucking
and they're white
freedom of
supremacists.
speech, but no responsibility to go with that.
Pandering to just the worst, just a basket of deplorables.
Yeah.
How does so?
At this point,
the white
actually-
supremacists are anti-vax.
They're all the same.
Like I get like the fringe.
I'm not drawing a connection between those two. I'm saying they're both out there, right? And they're both on the fringe. Right?
If it's bad, it votes conservative.
No.
Most of what's bad votes conservative.
No, I mean a lot of what's bad comes from the other end of the spectrum, and I've already spoken.
Okay, I'm being
votes
provocative.
Green, votes
I'll
NDP,
pull that
votes
back.
Liberal.
No, but my point is like
Okay,
like,
so
like not
let's say
voting for the party that has the platform that you support more than you don't, despite some of the other voters, doesn't make any sense to me because that's what it seems like you're saying. Like
Well,
it's just like these other people who are unrelated to me
And are a fringe minority.
and are a fringe minority are also going to vote for this party. So
No,
I'm
it's-
not going to vote for this party because they're
No,
spiteful,
no,
right?
I'm-
Because Nazis or white supremacists are not an integral part of the conservative movement in this country. I don't.
In fact, if we had every single one of them in the country, we could fit them onto this property with about 75 square feet left over.
probably right. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not so petty and small-minded that I'm not going to vote for someone just because other people I don't agree with are. All right, there's none of that playing into this. All right, I will admit that there's an emotional aspect to this, like a knee-jerk, and there's a logical side of things. You've raised a lot of the logic, right? If there's a bunch of policies that he's going to bring in, like if
That are
I don't know if he were to
sound economic
If he were to say to me or say out loud, I'm going to force through Energy East and make that happen. That's a big check mark in the vote for Pierre box.
Oh, yeah?
Massive. Right now, I've heard I've heard conflicting reports that Quebec is actually on board with reconsidering Energy East, and I've heard them saying that I've heard it said they're already coming out and saying no, that ain't happening.
I've heard that the population is warmer to it, but the political leadership has still said hard no.
There's some polling in Quebec that shows like Energy East and more energy infrastructure and pipeline stuff is like is significant. Like the numbers even in Quebec are in the 70s in support of. But as far as political leadership, I don't know.
So far as I know, Legault and who's the other guy? PAQ leader have both said, no, forget it. Not happening. Yeah. Or, no, so who's the leader of the bloc?
I can't even remember.
Anyway.
Because fuck those guys.
Both of those guys have said, no, it's not going to happen.
Or, just so you understand me clearly, va te faire foutre. I got no time for those guys. Quebec has no time for me. I got no time. Va te faire foutre.
What does foutre mean?
Fuck yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Mm. It was all French to me, so yes.
Because fuck those guys.
Fuck those guys.
Because
okay, so emotionally, and this is where the two kind of come together, right? And this is where Trump has really fucked Pierre, right? And I think I can say how I see it, but I think it's how a lot of voters in this country see it, right? And the Premier Smith, who I've been kind of meh about up to this point. I just whatever, right?
I have my own conspiracy theories about her behavior that maybe we'll get into a little later.
You know, I just not only is she not doing me any favors, I'm like, you know what? On this issue, on the tariffs issue, we needed her to be Canadian, and she is petulantly playing.
What should she have done?
With the way, okay, assuming the tariffs thing is actually a real thing, and
So like 10%,
it's actually
tariff on Canadian energy.
we should have said, okay, fine, do what Ford did. I have a lot of respect for Ford now, right? And I haven't had a lot of respect for Ford up to this point. When Ford said, okay, all right, well, we're going to raise energy prices to 3 of your states. And those states are like, whoa.
And then what happened?
Right? Oh, then someone sweet talked him and said, and it was obviously
sweet
just
talk him, or did Trump say, "I'll fucking hit you with 50%," and Ford backed down?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's exactly what happened.
Last I heard,
Ford said, "I will hit your automotive sector, and you're stealing them with 50% tariffs. I will drive you into the ground." And Ford said, "Okay, I won't do it."
No, whatever. I mean, we're already in a shit place. But anyway,
if we did. Now, we're still on top of what Smith should have done. If we did put a reciprocal tariff on petroleum energy, what do you think would happen with that? What do you think the difference is between those two? Those two systems.
I'm not saying a reciprocal tariff because that doesn't make
any
sense.
Kind of tariff.
Us bringing in, no, it would be an export tax.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like an export tax on our energy. What do you think the downstream effect of that would be?
An energy crisis in the U.S.
And. So the Americans are just going to sit there and say, "Yeah, okay, we'll just go."
So obviously, it's just about negotiations.
No, it's not. It's oil is a very different industry than electricity. If we put an export tariff on our electricity, there is no immediate other source that the Americans could move to. We kind of have them in a very tight spot because you can't just realign your grid to another power source. You can't get power from anywhere else. You have to generate, and that would take years to do. However, with petroleum, the United States could easily start looking for alternative sources and then realign their supply chains away from us. And once they are realigned, they're not coming back. It would be an incredibly short, it would be long-term devastation for the Canadian economy for a short-term point of peak. That's why she's so much against it.
No,
the people who are saying, "Oh, we should put reciprocal export taxes on energy," they're people who don't know anything about the energy industry.
I think we should be doing that now. It is
I
contingent.
go back to my point. I don't think you know enough about the energy industry. Otherwise, you wouldn't support that.
It is contingent on something like an Energy East. We do need to diversify. If there's one thing that's
Absolutely.
coming out of this, right, and this is why we needed Smith on board. Canada needs to be consistent across the board in saying, okay, listen, this is stupid. You shouldn't be doing this. We don't want to have to react to this.
No, we shouldn't.
Right? Now we're having to diversify. Right now, and
Yes.
that's why what really pisses me off about the rest of Canada, BC and Quebec in particular, is again Energy East and
Northern Gateway.
and getting to Tidewater on the West Coast. Right? Fuck you guys. Again, I'm probably the only leftist separatist in this fucking province. All right, but I'm done with this nonsense. Okay, as I keep saying, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's build the railhead at Churchill.
Sure. Yeah.
And get the fuck
Get
out
deep
there.
water on three coasts.
So, but I mean,
But again,
That is-
how long is
that
that
is-
going to take? Let's say it was approved. How long is that going to take?
fine.
No, because that's the operative point.
We know in the short term this is going to suck no matter how we look at it. No way this isn't going to suck, right? What Trump is doing is fucking his own people. It's fucking the rest of the world.
Sure.
The global economy is tanking right now.
But you wait until you have that export infrastructure, then you
This
hit
is
the
not
United
what she
States.
has been saying, right?
Really?
Everything that she has been talking about has been about it's playing at politics. On the one hand, there's the stuff that's coming out that she's, about Ben Shapiro, about what she's been saying to the, down Mar-a-Lago, those meetings about how, don't mess this up for Pierre. He's a lot like you and stuff like that. And that's where the emotional side comes in, right? And thankfully, that's coming to bite Pierre in the ass, and hopefully it's
Thankfully, that's coming to bite Pierre in the ass.
yeah.
So you don't want him to win no matter what. So now we're back to Steve's point where you just don't want him to win because you don't want to win. Even though he's got good policies, you just don't want him to win.
At this point, because of the tariffs, because of what he has and has not been saying about it, because of what Danielle Smith in particular has been saying, right? I think there is a logical and an emotional reaction to this, but I actually do not trust Pierre to deal with MAGA, Trump administration.
And you do Carney.
I do.
Why?
Yeah, why?
Because he's not Justin, because he actually has an understanding of how an economy works, right?
What makes you say that?
Is an accurate understanding?
Yeah, so what makes you say that? What in his
Because
track
I got
record-
into this. I got into this with the fellow who was
Yeah.
training me this week,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, and his argument was like, well, you don't become the director of the Bank of England if you don't
Yeah.
know how markets work." I'm like, well, I think you have a central banker's understanding of how markets works, which may not exactly be what bankers. Right?
Also, Mark Carney looked really good coming out of the 2008 recession in Canada.
yeah,
And as Stephen Harper points out, no, that's because he rode Jim Flaherty's coattails on that one.
yeah.
He just did what Jim Flaherty,
Told him to.
advised him to do.
Yeah.
And then when he went on his own to the Bank of England, he fell flat on his face.
Yeah.
Whereas his successor, his successor at the Bank of England undid all of his policies. And then now I know you think Liz Truss shouldn't be trusted at any point. Jacob Rees-Mogg has also come out publicly to say and there's video of him questioning Carney in cabinet or where he was brought before a cabinet or a committee, a parliamentary committee to answer questions about the state of British finances, where he's asking, well, why are you putting in these policies? What is your end goal? And Carney's basically, giving him baffle gab, saying, well, I don't know. I didn't anticipate that was going to happen. I didn't realize that was going to be the end result. And trying to disguise it in a bunch of techno gab, which of course Mogg, was kind of prepared for and saw through it. Carney did not do well at the Bank of England. Look at the state of the British economy in, say, up to 2 years after he took over to 3 years after he left, when you're seeing the full effects of his policy regime.
Okay.
Carney's got one trick in his economic book, and that's qualitative easing or quantitative easing. One trick. And that has kind of faded, not faded, it's no longer a useful policy in the contemporary global money market. it stopped being relevant in 2015.
And just to be clear, the quantitative easing is a fancy way of saying money printer go burr.
Yes. Print money.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to claim...
And low interest rates.
Right. Yeah.
Low interest rates debase the currency.
Yeah.
And throw money, like create money out of nothing, throw it into the economy,
Yeah.
and hope something catches fire.
Yeah.
All right,
And then you end up with inflation.
And then you end up with inflation.
I'm going to have a
Welcome to 2024.
2 to 3 part response to this.
Okay.
All right. The one is, I will admit, maybe I am naive. Maybe I don't understand enough about economics. Right. I'm not claiming to know enough. That does speak to the optics. Right. So right now, and I consider myself relatively intelligent, relatively informed.
And devilishly handsome.
Oh, thank you. And that's without shaving today.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, I lost my train of thought. Flatterer.
Fuck. Did it again. You were talking about, consider yourself like a relatively well-informed...
Right.
decent-
But I think this plays into, again, this is the optics. So every every point you've raised, kind of like you're kind of questioning, well, how are the full polls actually reflecting this? Right. I'm saying this is why. Right. This is what a lot of people are probably responding to. Right. Now, when it comes to Carney's record, and I'm just going on what I picked up in the last month since he became the leader. Right. So, specific to when he was at the Bank of England, right? I immediately latched onto the fact that, because you guys brought up Liz Truss. I'm like, really, we're bringing up Liz Truss. But what stood out to me about, okay, his time at the Bank of England is bookended, or it bookends Brexit.
Yes.
Right? And so it's like, okay, buddy.
And that's been his defense. Say, it wasn't my fault, it was Brexit.
You're in charge of dealing with this shitstorm we just, this bullet we just shot ourselves in the balls with, right? Fix it, right? And maybe he didn't do a great job of it. It was like, oh, well, it's obviously your fault, Mr. Carney. Hang on, I'm not done yet.
Understatement.
I'm not done yet.
That he didn't do a great job of it. He
Right.
deliberately did a poor job of it. Well, that was the charge, that he deliberately did that because he wanted the charge, okay, unsubstantiated. The charge is that Carney was very, very Remain. And so he thought, if I sabotage the currency, then maybe we can create such antipathy towards Brexit that we can get another referendum to go back in.
Okay.
To be fair, the British response to Brexit was poor on the governance side as well, right?
Yes. Many people, it was like a bipartisan response in Parliament felt that if we make things so bad, maybe we can get people to demand another referendum to go back.
Yeah, but David Cameron resigned because he was a Remainer and he felt, okay, well, now we're in this, now we got this thing. So he resigned and I'm not the one to manage it.
Right.
Boris Johnson was elected leader of the Conservative Party to
sabotage. To sabotage Brexit. Or that's
according-
what Bojo did.
Sure, but that's not what the voters who elected him voted for. They voted. He was elected
to fix it, to make it work,
to push it through, and he did. He got it through.
Oh yeah,
right.
Eventually, yeah.
But
so and
no, but the Brits have done nothing to deregulate their economy at all. I mean, which was the prime argument of Brexit was that the European regulation was stifling industry and British and all kinds of. British economic productivity, and then the Conservatives did nothing to...
Yeah. And so, they continually stalled and dragged, and even today, they're trying to keep the economy adhering to the European regulations. Daniel Hannan produces content on this all the time about he's asking, okay, it was dumb enough to do this when you were in the EU.
Yeah.
Now you want to adhere to the economic standards and regulations of an organization that you have absolutely zero influence in?
Yeah.
It's insanity.
I think their argument for doing that is just because they need to comply with those regulations if they want to export to the EU. I think it's their argument, at least.
Yeah.
But they haven't done anything. They need to come up with free trade agreements with other jurisdictions.
Yeah, and they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
So getting back to that, right? So how much sympathy do I have if they put him in place and and he deliberately sabotaged it, which I'm saying he did or I'm not saying he did or didn't do.
Yeah.
Right? I have zero fucking sympathy.
So
because
you say it's irrelevant, doesn't affect how we should judge Mark Carney's efficacy in managing an economy.
separate statement
Take
because
it-
the
take it aside.
conversation's gone to a different direction. All right. Brexit as a concept was a crass populist move, right? It was poorly thought out, and nothing points that out more than Northern Ireland. When all of a sudden, I think they got to a point where they're like, someone raised it like well after Brexit, and it was like, holy fuck, what have we done? Like, look at what we have to deal with now.
Okay, this is Trent's first soapbox today. I'm not going to touch it.
Right?
I'm going to leave it alone.
Well,
I'm gonna walk away.
In so
going
many
at it.
ways, and because now all of a sudden they have to deal with the Irish problem, right? Because the Republic is staying in the EU, right?
Yep.
So now they have to allow EU-style free trade between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now they have to artificially create this trade barrier between Northern Ireland and the rest of Great Britain.
Which is prohibited by the Good Friday Agreements.
Right. So, and then, Steve, when you're talking about how they have to keep a bunch of regulations in place to make...
Well, that's their argument for keeping those regulations.
to make...
Yes, that
to
is
make,
their argument.
to make trade with Europe possible.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't think that through at all either. Right? So I'm saying...
Do you consider that like insurmountable?
I'm just saying it was poorly thought out. They didn't have a plan for it. I don't think they realized what they were actually going to do to themselves. That's why I say they shot themselves in the balls.
The people who had the plan weren't the people making the decisions. The people who were making the decisions didn't want the good plan. They were of your mind to say, like, no, they were Remainers. The entire British executive was Remainers.
Well, then, if you're so...
And they wanted to do, like, they're not going to facilitate Brexit. They're not going to make it work.
I get tired of all the apologism for things, right?
Okay.
If it comes down to it, if you're the ones in power, put the people in power who are supposed to make these things happen. You can't keep going the guys who stayed in power.
Didn't they try? Didn't they deliberately vote out Labour and bring in Conservative because the Conservatives were supposed to make Brexit work? And then what happened?
They didn't.
They didn't. And so then what happened after that? When the Conservative Party got absolutely obliterated in the last elections because they were held to account by their failure to do what their electorate put them in power to do.
Yeah.
And now
Once
the British
it
have
was
this
done.
massive problem where the will of the people is over here and the entire British political system is on the other end of the spectrum. But again, we're getting into the merits of Brexit. Let's go back to Carney
Right,
and
so let's
whether or
go
not
back
you
to- I'm
feel
just
he's
saying-
a trustworthy guy to manage the economy and why you feel that way.
First of all, again, I don't think it's accurate to say, oh, well, he did a shit job because
Okay.
you're
Okay,
at
take that off
Bank
the
of
table.
England, right?
Take that off the table. You think he's...
And
what else?
So I also have a big problem. Okay, so we're going to point to him at the Bank of England
Okay.
and say, okay, he sucked there.
Yeah.
Right? He was successful in 2008, but we're going to downplay that
Yes.
by saying it wasn't him.
Right.
So
Okay.
So my response to that is like, fuck off.
Okay.
Right? You can't just go, okay,
Okay.
well, he sucked over here, and we're going to make it all about him.
Okay,
And over
so you
here,
think-
we're going to make it all about someone else.
Okay, so you're
right?
going to say he was good in 2008 and he was good at the Bank of England.
And
You feel that's his resume.
No, I'm going to revert to my naivete. I don't know enough.
Okay.
I am saying that optically,
Okay.
right
Optically,
now,
it looks good.
I have more trust in Carney to fight the tariff war. If the tariff war didn't exist right now,
Okay, it'd be a different story.
very different conversation.
What does Carney proposed that makes you feel confident in him?
I've seen nothing that he's proposed so far. It's all about the messaging, right? We're going to fight this. We're going to take care of our workers, right? And that's what we need right now. The last thing we need is for the economy to tank, for everyone to be unemployed. get into a massive depression, right? How is he going to do it? I don't know. And all I'm measuring against is Pierre. And I don't trust him not to buckle to Trump.
Why?
Okay. Yeah. So, okay.
Because he's
Carney's got no policies put forward that you can point out to say, I like this idea. Poilievre has,
a scheduled policy
but
release.
you don't trust him. You trust Carney. You can't tell me why you trust him.
No, I've told you why I trust him. Right.
The messaging.
So far.
The messaging.
No, that's your messaging is about policy
Tell
so
me
far.
again why
re-articulate why you
Yeah,
trust
because
him.
it looks to me like you trust Carney
Former
because you trust him.
governor of the Bank of Canada
Yeah.
and the Bank of
Okay.
England.
Okay.
He understands how an economy works
Okay.
more than Pierre does.
Okay.
You understand that's why we don't trust him?
Yeah.
Like, literally, the reason you trust him is the reason we don't. Right? Like,
You guys don't trust anyone.
Do you know what
I certainly don't trust civil servants.
Justin Trudeau's senior economic advisor was in the last 6 years of his mandate? Do you know who that was?
Yeah, you've told me
Who
multiple
was it?
times.
Who was it?
Mark Carney.
Right. So if Mark Carney, you feel he knows how to manage an economy and that he's got a good, he's a good sound manager of this. Why is our current economic situation not better?
Because Justin was in charge.
So you don't think he really followed Carney's advice?
No, he didn't follow anyone's advice.
Ah,
He was often fucking Peter Pan, Never Neverland. Like in his brain, I don't know. The more we talk about him, the more I go, what the fuck was he thinking? I don't think he was thinking at all.
Are you familiar with Mark Carney's book, Values, written in 2022?
I don't read books. To quote the famous philosopher, I drink a lot and I know things.
I've got a meme of that, and it's the Tyrion from
Game of
That's
Thrones,
the philosopher in
and it
question.
says that on top, and on the
Tyrion
bottom
was-
it says, "Turns out Tyrion is a warrant officer."
I never made that. So I'm even worse than that.
Okay,
I'm a career corporal.
Courier Corporal. You were the CDS, Corporal down at stores.
Corporal down in stores. I actually had two little punks came up to me in stores
Yeah.
one day because I was
Yeah.
wearing the cap badge.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're like, "You passed your QL3, Trent or Harden?" I'm like, "Fucking rights, I
They
did.
did.
You little punks, fuck off."
Fuck off. Well, I will give you credit. I will say, absolutely. Messaging, and this is politics, right? You want to frame your opponent on your terms, and don't let them frame themselves. And the Liberals have done a really, really good job of framing Poilievre as this rabid MAGA in the back pocket of Trump kind of guy. And they're very. I'm going to give the Liberal Party credit. They are very good at messaging.
Yep.
And they're very consistent with that. They get everybody on board. And this has been consistent right since 1991.
And I think
they're very good at that.
I think that's something that Poilievre does not understand, is that messaging in elections, messaging always trumps policy, right?
Yeah.
Poilievre does a scheduled policy release.
Yes.
At 6 a.m., I think every Monday or Tuesday morning. He does it at 6 a.m. Eastern
Yep.
so the papers can get it
Yep.
and have it in
Yep.
that edition, right? And it gets up on the web in time for people before
Yep.
people get up, right? He does this, and it's like, nobody gives a fuck. Like,
Well-
I give a fuck, you give a fuck.
I think that speaks to this, to the, how would you say, brain types?
Yeah.
People who are predisposed to vote Liberal NDP make decisions emotionally.
Yeah.
People who are predisposed to vote Conservative make decisions on policy. We tend to be policy wonks.
Yeah.
Whereas, so messaging is really, really important if you're addressing that half of the electorate, which is already kind of predisposed to emotional decisions, right?
Yeah, but I would point
And
out
this is something that conservatives have a hard time wrapping their heads
Yeah,
around.
because they don't
think that
they
way.
don't seem to understand that they need to
They
message
don't think that
that
way.
they need to do both, right?
Yeah.
The conservatives, like the
Yeah.
liberals, can do the one. They
Yep.
can just focus all their efforts on messaging,
Yes.
but the conservatives have to do both. They have
Right.
to do the policy wonk for the policy
Yep.
wonk people who are, but
Yep.
they shouldn't spend as much energy on it as they do because those people are the base and are going to vote
Right. They're
for
going to
them
vote for you anyway. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, while I appreciate you're not taking the base for granted, you need to take the base a little more for granted.
Yeah, or you need to reach beyond your base.
Yeah.
Well,
you need to speak the language beyond your base.
Right.
No, but here's the thing, and I'm going to argue that the right is not short on leveraging emotion as well. That's why we see the extremes at the other end of the spectrum, right? The don't take away my right to do anything, even though I'm irresponsible in the use of those rights. I don't think any of that shit through, but there's that emotional shit going on at the other end of the spectrum.
Rights.
No,
We need to take away their rights.
no, that is not what I said.
Read the last 2 chapters of Carney's book.
I don't agree with that, if that's what he says. I don't agree with taking away people's rights. What I do expect from my fellow fucking citizens is if you've got rights, have the decency to use them responsibly.
Okay.
Don't sit there.
Anyway, let's go back to what you're saying about the use of emotion in
That
framing
exists. That
and
exists on
messaging.
the right, and so I think that is the dance that you were just talking about, having to do messaging and policy.
But we're saying the
right?
conservatives just aren't as good at it.
They have to be careful with their messaging at both ends of the spectrum for themselves, because if they want to get the moderates, they have to message a
Yes.
certain way, and that's
Yep.
going to piss off the emotional,
Yeah.
the emotional extreme in their own
and the
party.
conservatives aren't as good at message control.
Yeah.
They get too many people who just freelance off on the side, lake of fire, this kind of type stuff, right? So that's where I think this is just a matter of organization, not ideology, organization and political culture. The Liberal Party, as compared to, say, an ideology, compare them to the Greens or the NDP. The Liberal Party is very good at organization, message discipline, and message deliverance. They're very good at that.
I mean, and part of it from Pierre's point of view is he doesn't do himself any favors, right? It's not just the Liberal Party portraying himself a certain way. He behaves a certain way, right? So he is tied in with these other things that are attached to him. And he's done nothing.
Personal bias, though.
He's done nothing to divest himself of those connections, right? So, for example, when we talk about trucker convoys, he's all about yay, trucker convoys.
Yes.
They had the right to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to speak to the rights and wrongs of that. I am talking
You're
about
just
the
saying
optics,
that it was bad optics.
right?
Well,
So,
who
and
do you-
those are going to continue to haunt him. Now, here's the other problem I have with Pierre, right? And I had with Justin as well. And I've had with politics in general for the last 12, 15 years, which is all the negative messaging. It's all about owning the other side, right? It's not about reality. It's not about policy, right? It's in as much as it's ever about policy, that policy is only about, well, if I utter this policy out loud, this policy intention, it makes the other guy look bad.
Well, that's
Right?
kind of the point of politics, though, isn't it?
No.
Say, like, here are my ideas.
No,
This is why they work better than the other
The
guys'
point
ideas.
of politics for me is governance.
Okay.
Right? And I need people to govern.
But
and
isn't
I
that-
need them to govern on the things that fucking matter.
Isn't that
right?
what you're talking about? When you say, this is my policy, this is what I plan to do in governance.
I don't need any political party to keep going. These guys are bad. These guys are bad. These guys are bad. Right? No matter what they do, they're bad. Right?
Well, then, what's the argument to vote for them if they don't?
Yeah.
And I don't need a party that's always going, they're always bad, I'm always good.
Okay, so what do you want?
So, because if we look at housing, for instance,
Yeah.
right? That is a long-term fucking problem.
Okay.
And I actually have a beef with the two of you clowns, because the reason housing's so expensive in this country is because of free market economics. So
What? Okay, hold on. Soapbox number 2. We let Trent have this. Let's not get distracted on it. Stay on the point.
Anybody can come and buy stuff and can buy property in Canada. So now we've got a bunch of rich people from all over the fucking world coming in and buying up all our expensive property, driving up access, driving up.
Okay, let's not get off. Okay, whatever. You fine. We'll let you have that. Fine. Go back to tell me what you want from.
So anyways,
I know what you don't want. Tell me what you do.
all of
Fucking
a whole bunch of our problems,
Easy.
a whole bunch of our problems
Not like
have
zoning
been-
has anything to do with it.
have been multi-administration,
Okay.
right?
All right.
A lot of shit happened and didn't happen under
permanent
Harper.
regulations.
Again, I know what you don't want. Tell me what you do want.
I want Pierre
Okay.
to come up with shit that matters to me,
Okay.
right? And stop picking on stuff. Like, stop saying the Liberals suck across the board. If the Liberals have done something that actually fucking works, acknowledge it and fucking move on. Then I'll have some trust in you, right?
But if the Liberals done that works.
Yeah. Like, is there a glaring oversight that you think he should be acknowledging? Say, hey, let's build on that.
Yeah, because you say he should acknowledge the
successes.
stuff that's clear,
Yeah.
the clear successes, and,
Yeah.
and praise them for their successes. But what are the successes? Where should he be pointing to?
I'm just talking after 40 years as a voter in this country. All right. Politics were not always this way. All right. It's like you focus on the shit that matters. You're not always just looking for something for the sake of making the other guy look bad. Right. Like for example,
I'm going to say when.
like blackface. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. It was a thing. It was kind of ugly. The main thing you point out was just the hypocrisy of the left, as far as I'm concerned. Right?
Yeah.
Bringing up stuff from people's past, I don't like it on either side.
Okay.
Right? And again, if you're picking on that shit, I got no time for you on either side. The first of the major two parties in this country that gets back to actually about politics, policy, and governance without having to sling shit like a fucking monkey around.
Didn't you criticize Polly Everson like she's too much on policy? Too much on policy. Trent saying he's not enough on policy.
That's what it seems like.
It seems to me that you're
He's a very negative. He's all he's ever doing is just
and
criticizing,
then the
picking
guy who's
shit
got
apart.
zero policy
So
that
being
you
the-
know of is the guy who's you're voting for.
So what's his actual official job title?
leader of the opposition.
Right. And what is the job of the opposition?
Trent hates it when you do this.
What is the job of the opposition?
We need a bright light to shine in Trent's eyes when we're doing this. Have a dark room,
500
shine a light in his eyes. If you don't answer the question, we're going to waterboard you again.
It's to oppose. As I just said, politics were not always this way. All right? They focused on the issues, and in a way, I guess maybe I haven't articulated quite this way. They focused on the issues that were relevant, and they were about bringing the conversation to that issue and getting it resolved. Nowadays, it isn't about that. It's just about owning the other side.
Going back to 1867, could you name me a conservative leader who you felt did that?
I'd say, again, everyone prior to a certain point was actually acting within a certain amount of decorum. All parties.
What point?
What's that?
What point? When do you think it changed?
For me, I think I always go back to the Points of Light was Bush Senior, right? Bush 1?
Yeah. What, early 90s?
Yeah.
No.
Bush
1
41.
was... Yeah, Bush first was...
Well, he was early 90s. He was 88 to 92.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
You know, and again, that's when you started seeing Klein coming out. Klein to me is a very ugly, ugly, ugly ruler.
You smile when you say that name. I'm going to put a portrait of Ralph up on the wall here.
Ralph Klein, peace be upon him.
Yes, that's right.
Ralph Klein was an ugly, ugly, ugly man.
No way.
Yeah, he wasn't the handsomest guy.
Yeah, he wasn't
Jeez,
handsome.
No, he was ugly in personality.
Except he was the greatest premier in Canadian history, probably Commonwealth history. Anyway.
Irreconcilable differences here, but
That's my soapbox that you don't get the challenge.
The sound of my eyes
and
rolling
and
again.
you still are up too. So again,
But-
what I'm kind of driving at here is that I think your own personal bias is that you like conservative leaders who are not very conservative. Guys like Joe Clark, You've held him up as like what a conservative leader should be. Andrew Scheer, Aaron O'Toole.
No,
It's like the kind of conservative leaders who you advocate for always lose. And lose by significant margins.
Whoa.
So I'm saying
That's
kind of a dead end for a conservative leader.
There are no circumstances under which I will hold up Joe Clark as an effective prime minister of this country.
No, like he was the kind of guy who you held up as a good leader.
We have discussed the fact that he was representative of red Tories.
Which you like.
But then again, so was Brian Mulroney.
Yeah.
There have been effective, and this is what I've figured out.
Is there a color for crooked? That would have been a like
brown.
Yeah, he was more like he was a red Tory, but he was a really brown Tory.
It's purple because it's both fucking parties. They're both.
Well, I would say that corruption is in the culture of the Liberal Party, but not all Liberal leaders. I don't think Paul Martin was corrupt. I think Paul Martin was a pretty effective prime minister.
I think Paul Martin was a pretty effective prime minister too, but I know Trent thinks he's corrupt as fuck.
I remember.
I don't know that, but Jean Chrétien was corrupt as fuck.
And I remember a soundbite that came out. So that there were hearings about Chrétien after the fact. And after, I don't know if it was when, or we just talked about Turner, right?
No, we're talking about Martin.
Paul Martin.
Sorry.
Paul Martin.
Paul Martin. He might have still been in power, but it was, it might have been after. But the soundbite was he was sitting in a room watching the hearings of the Chrétien, and there was some denial made. And Martin going, yes! Like celebrating
that
this.
Chrétien was going down.
No, that Chrétien had defended himself. It was sympathetic to Chrétien, and I think it had something to do with Martin. And I just, again, I came out with a bad taste in my mouth. So,
you know what? I don't have any evidence that he was crystal clear or that he was squeaky clean. But the point is that I can name you like HRDC scandal, ad scam, the greatest scandal in the greatest single event of corruption in Canadian history, possibly Commonwealth history, and the APEC affair. Indelible evidence of corruption that ran to the very fiber of the party. I can do the same thing with the Trudeau government. There was the SNC-Lavalin affair. There was the We charity scandals. His multiple ethics violations. Like, you cannot argue to me that Chrétien and Liberal governments did not have deep endemic problems with corruption. But I can't name any such incidents under the Martin government.
Yeah, you're probably quite right. And in fact, you heard it here, folks, that the two across the table from me have actually almost quasi-praised Paul Martin as Prime Minister.
I'll praise Paul Martin.
Yeah, I thought he was a very effective Prime Minister.
That's fine. He managed to balance the budget under when he was finance minister.
If I had to choose between Paul Martin and Brian Mulroney, I will vote Paul Martin all day.
Yeah. Oh, right on.
All day.
Anyways, basically what I'm getting at, there was a time, because one of the lessons I've learned about, when it comes to American politics and Canadian politics in particular, right? Just being exposed to them and the impact they have in my life, it's like, every 4 or 5 years I'm checking my watch, right? And I was like, okay, well, I would have been happier if it went the other way. But you know what? Life carries on. Because they get shit done. And the shit they get done is pretty much the important stuff we talk about. Like it's, as you've put it before, Patty, it's kind of like we all kind of agree on the priorities and what the issues actually are.
I think we used to. I don't know if we do anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, we
right?
used to.
And that's the way it was.
But I would say I would go back even further. I think you got to go pre-1963 for that. I think that kind of ended in the early 1960s.
Well, I wasn't even born, and I wasn't. I wasn't voting.
Yeah, we obviously weren't
paying
political
attention.
observers,
right?
But looking at the literature, I think this disagreement on the end destination predates our birth significantly.
I don't think. Again, from my point of view, south of the border, north of the border.
You see it more as late 80s.
Stuff is, it's carried on. You know, like my life has not been affected overly. It's like, oh, okay, well, now I got a different tax form to fill out every year. Oh, my tax is going to be a higher or a bit lower this year. Whatever, right? In the meantime, I can worry about the usual shit. Having a roof over my head, groceries, gas for the car, having a car.
You
having a
feel
job,
you haven't
right?
really been affected in the last 10 years?
I'm feeling that I have been affected strongly. That's what I'm saying. Like between what's happened south of the border since 2016, back and forth, and
But I mean, say strictly Canadian
and
domestic policy.
and 2015 here.
Yeah.
Like I do not have that ease of mind when it comes to politics anymore.
So just
I don't
with the
trust,
Canadian context, do you feel you're better off now?
No.
Worse off now, or about the same?
worse off.
Are you?
Worse off, and we are talking about 10 years of liberal rule.
And yet
Right.
you feel that we'd be better off with the same party running affairs for the next 4 years?
That's the big question mark for me. I told you coming into this.
Oh,
I don't
you're
know.
not
I don't
decided
know
yet.
who to vote for under the current system. I don't know if I'm going to vote. Like part of me, you know, just because of my riding, I'm considering voting NDP.
Your writing's conservative held, isn't it? Right now,
I don't know.
because I think there's only one that's.
Yeah, I think.
I think there's two
Yeah,
New
there's-
Democrats
there's-
in Edmonton.
Is there?
Federally?
No, I don't think
I thought there was
federally. I
two
think that-
liberals.
Yeah.
Wasn't Randy Boissonneau here?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think he was like down around
There's
Calder.
two liberals and the
Look
rest
it
was,
up.
Yeah.
Look it up. But I would, and just as a protest vote.
Yeah, yeah.
Just as a protest vote, you know, because I feel, first of all, it's probably going to go Tory. If it ain't going to go
probably.
Tory, it's going to go Liberal.
Probably. Yeah.
And I do have a bad taste in my mouth for both those parties, right? I can forgive the Liberals a certain amount because Justin is gone.
What are you, Edmonton Northwest?
I think so. Where is 149th and 107th on there? Yeah, I'm in there.
Yeah,
I think I'm in there too.
yeah, because it goes all the way to.
Yeah, I'm in Edmonton Northwest. We've got, I forget his name, but he's definitely conservative in there now.
What's that? That's Highway 2. Highway 2. That's
No, that's not.
No, that's
high.
16.
It's 16. So you're. Not that anybody can see it.
2 is
but Trent,
97, isn't it?
Trent's house is kind of right where my finger.
okay.
is.
So I'm,
Okay, so
I'm
you're
Edmonton
Edmonton
Center.
Yeah.
That might be Randy Boissonneau, isn't it?
Let's find out.
Might be. Anyway. You know, I think the NDP is an absolutely viable vote. And I don't think it's a protest vote. Sometimes you have to.
It's not.
Well,
telling me who.
but part of me doesn't want to vote for them either.
Why
I'm
not?
not happy with the direction of the party. I don't have time for the new left. And I've had conservative and NDP come to my door so far. And I've had the exact same conversation with both of them. Pierre leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I don't like how he does politics.
Right?
I'm not happy with the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
I'm very upset with what they've done in the last 10 years.
So what about the New Democrats?
New Democrats, I don't like how they've allowed the party to get stupid, right?
To become two left.
Well, it's just there's no critical thought to the party anymore, right? I said to the guy, when you have pro-Palestinian protesters disrupting gay pride parades, I'm done.
So what do you think of Rod Loyola jumping from the provincial New Democrats to the federal Liberals?
He's been dropped from the ticket.
He has?
He has.
Wow. He didn't. Now,
Now the Liberal Party.
what happened? Did he not win the nomination? Because I saw campaign signs with his name on it.
The Liberal Party dropped him. They haven't said why, but the article I read said that the National Post came across a video from 2009 or something like that.
Because
where-
Rod was really radical back in
and
his day.
he and the quote I read, and I can't remember what the source is. I think it might be CBC, but appeared to praise Hezbollah and Hamas.
Oh, hell yeah. Rod's fucking nuts.
So
He is a moonbat.
and again, I got no time for that. Right? As
I just
we
find
know.
it really interesting how candidates jump back and forth from NDP to Liberal.
Well,
like,
it's always provincial to federal.
Yeah, or like say, look, like Bob Rae.
Bob Rae. He's the obvious
the
example.
Wynne government in provincial government in Ontario. Lots of jump back and forth between New Democrats. Yeah, provincial to federal. Yeah, lots of jump back and forth. Okay, what do we got here?
So yeah,
It was Mr. Boissonneau.
There's
It
actually
was okay. Yeah.
yeah, that's Edmonton Center. You're Edmonton West, I think.
Oh, there is an NDP. There
Yeah,
you go.
there's two.
Yeah,
Heather
Blake
McPherson.
Desjardins.
Yeah, one in. Oh no, sorry, he's
Yeah, just talk and say Edmonton. Just talk
Griesbach of
Edmonton.
all places.
Yeah, because the army moved out. God.
Yeah.
And then two. So one in Edmonton, two Liberals, one in Edmonton, one in Calgary, and then two NDPs.
But we had me in Edmonton Center. That would be Randy Boissonneau. But now that's been vacated because he's not running.
Yeah,
again.
he's not running again, so that one's up for grabs.
Are you Edmonton Center? I thought you were Edmonton.
That's what you pointed me out. Huh?
Yeah.
I think you're Edmonton.
I'm Edmonton Northwest.
Oh yeah, you are Edmonton Center. I stand corrected. There we go.
I can't remember the name of my guy. He's a very thin dude. Anyway, so yeah, Steve.
But-
what are your predictions?
Predictions?
Yeah, who do you think's
Fuck,
going to win?
I don't know. And I'm stressing.
Because
If I had her, I'd be losing it. But if I predict, I don't know who to believe in polls anymore. Right? Like
I think we have to be very.
you've sown doubt in my
we
in my
have
brain
to be
about
really critical consumers of the polling information we take. Like for example, when 338 does an aggregate poll, their data's bad if it includes
Egos is
all the OS, Ecos, Nanos, Ipsos, and Angus Reid.
Right.
If it includes those four,
I think they always do.
your data is suspect because those four they're push pollers, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I know
There's
what I
also,
hope.
and again, sorry, go ahead.
I'm a prisoner of what I hope happens. Mm-hmm. Right. And the data that I'm running on internally is like, well, this is what it says. What the narratives are is it's probably going to be at least a Carney minority, if not a Carney majority. Mm-hmm. But my hopes, my dreams, my aspirations are for at least
your suspicion is that we're going to. So, what do you think the downstream effect of that's going to be?
like a Carney majority.
Yeah.
Instant national unity crisis. And this gets into my my little conspiracy theory about Danny's motives for what she's doing. But that aside, yeah, because like you said,
God, I hate conspiracy theories. I hate it.
Oh yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
When they're not yours.
You're not,
Can't we just talk? Can't we just talk rationally?
no, but yeah, instant national unity crisis because as you said earlier, then Canadian voters will realize they can't vote themselves out of a problem or out of
Especially
out of
Western
situation.
Canadian voters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Western
Yeah.
Canadian voters.
Yeah. Western
And I do
Canadian
have
voters.
some sympathy with that.
Yeah.
So part of me,
Right.
to avoid that, I'm sympathetic to Pierre Wynne. Maybe he deserves a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Liberal Party
Say, give him a chance. Give him a
does
chance.
deserve to get spanked.
I think the Liberal Party definitely deserves to get spanked, and I think I can
Again,
say that without bias.
It does getting rid, and this is something that's
Right, like because
bitten Pierre on the ass.
the cabinet is composed. The cabinet is smaller than Trudeau's cabinet.
But it's the exact same
It's the exact
people.
same people, though.
Do you know the nickname of this cabinet within my understanding from contacts I have in the Liberal Party? That the nickname is Team Do Over.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, because it's the exact same people from Trudeau's
you
cabinet.
should call it Team Mulligan.
Team Mulligan.
Yeah,
Be a
but-
little more subtle.
Yeah.
But
Team
then-
Mulligan, yeah.
Again, and this is an example of the negativity.
Yeah.
If it was all new people, then Pierre would be,
Yeah.
ha, it's all new people. They've got no experience. They don't deserve the government.
Well, sure,
you're
because
fucked.
that's
messaging.
That's his job.
You're fucked either way. No.
But you're
No.
nostalgic for the time when politicians would stand up and say, "My friends from the other side of the house,"
Yes.
as opposed to "These fucking assholes are evil and they're ruining this country,"
Yes.
which is where we're at now.
I have no time for someone who's just going to hit you with a lose-lose statement every time, right? I got no time for that, right? If you're going to point out that it's all the same people, right? And yet, and that's a bad thing. And it's like, okay, because you seem to be suggesting that a bunch of new people would be okay, right?
No.
Oh, no,
Well,
a bunch of new people. Well, they don't have any experience. Well, I'll tell you what, Pierre, if you go that way, guess what you're going to have when you
bunch
get
of
into
new
power?
people.
A bunch of new fucking people. So, like, I'm just like,
Well, let me give you something
stop being
that might,
stupid about
that
shit.
might make you feel a bit more hopeful. See, a bit more optimistic for the future in the big scheme of things. I was watching a podcast with your favorite person, Liz Truss, and she was talking to a British
Oh,
guy.
I have a comment about that.
And they were just purely discussing British issues,
Yeah.
right? They had nothing to do with anything external to the UK. And they were talking about, they both agreed that Britain needed a sea change in the direction that it was traveling. And they were saying, well, what are the odds that you
Isn't
could
it like
get,
a lump of rock attached to the bottom of the ocean?
No. There's
They float. You know, who's
Trent. That's what they want you to think.
I want to say it was Maisie Huano, but it's not. There was like it came up in like a U.S. House of Representatives committee meeting, and one of the reps, and it wasn't Maisie Huano because she's a Hawaiian
I
senator.
saw this. John actually brought this up. He sent this to me. And yeah,
Who
when
thought islands floated?
yeah, a senator
Oh, yeah?
talking to an admiral, and the admiral he's completely
Like,
Baffled
she's
because-
he
gobsmacked.
doesn't know how to answer this question.
Like, he's
Because
like,
this person thought
she
islands
for
floated.
real?
yeah.
But it wasn't Maisie Hirano. Even though Maisie Hirano is a fucking moonbat.
Yeah.
But she didn't think islands float because she's
Okay.
at least from Hawaii. And
She's
knows
from Hawaii. Okay.
Okay,
So
sorry.
anyway, but they were talking about what is the possibility that you could get radical change in Britain, say on the style of, say, what happened in the United States. And what Truss pointed out was that within the parliamentary, like within the American system, we talk a lot about the checks and the balances of there, but there's one thing that was kind of unanticipated is the extreme, in the current age, say in the age of executive orders, the extreme authority vested in the office of the presidency and how one individual, and maybe you could broaden it to say 12 individuals appointed by that one. So like you get a president and a cabinet, they have the capacity to render considerable change across the entire apparatus of government. Whereas in the Westminster system, you need 300 people to do that. You can't just say, well, this is our one prime minister. These are, say, the 16 people he or she appoints as cabinet, and now we're going to really just turn the whole system on its head. You need 300 odd people to do that. You need to elect the House. And in our context, a bare minimum, 172 people to do that. So maybe that'll make you feel better about things in that we're not going to have a radical change one way or the other. Our system guarantees that change will be gradual, whatever direction it takes. You feel good about now? Do you feel happy about now? Does that give you, a smile?
Possibly.
Are your fingers crossed and you're about to lie? Because you're about to lie?
No, I've got three. This is to remind myself. I've got three things. The third thing is going to get back. That's Steve, because we always do this to Steve. We hijack the conversation from Steve. Steve was in the middle of something, but fuck that guy.
What a hole. He's cold, man.
He is, yeah.
Ever since he became a conservative, I don't like him.
We'll come back to that. Quickly, you brought up Liz Truss again, and this is something I wanted to bring up. So you brought up Rees-Mogg,
Jacob Rees-Mogg. Yep.
and Liz Truss,
Yep.
Viz Carney.
Yep.
I actually, around the time that we were trading texts around that, I actually came across an article that quoted Rishi Sunak as actually, if not outright, wholeheartedly praising Carney.
Yeah.
At least putting his efforts in the context of the mess he had been handed. And that was Rishi Sunak. So there's that.
Okay.
And I just came across in my mind one of the, some of what I'm talking about that ties into ever since 91 and the ugliness of politics and, MAGA and Canadian MAGA and Pierre, right? One massive problem. And, playing at politics in general, that's the job. No, right? One of the big problems I have with the right, and we see it played out mostly in the U.S., but it has a trickle-down effect. Again, if anyone's drawn any connection, say, oh, yeah, we're like you, right? It's the absolute hypocritical insincerity of the right in the States, the Republicans, in being able to hold themselves accountable for sweet fuck all. They are just a bunch of hypocrites. And, the first instance of that was the vacancy under the Democrats on the Supreme Court, when the Republicans were, they blocked and they blocked
Yeah.
and they blocked. And
They didn't want
Right.
that individual. Who was it? Do you remember?
I can't even remember. No, they just said, we're not going to fill this position while we have the minority. Like, whatever. They blocked something on the... And then when
So, like, Obama was trying to appoint someone to the Supreme Court, and the Republicans in the House said they were going to block it? Or-
and they were saying, it's not appropriate to do this.
Oh,
they played some
yeah.
cut.
So what happened? Okay, this goes back to actually goes back to Harry Reid. Harry Reid got rid of the institutional filibuster in the Senate for judicial appointments because he wanted to get some votes on the Supreme Court, and he didn't have.
Who was Harry Reid?
He was the Senate Majority Leader for most of the time under the Obama administration until almost the midterms in Obama's last term.
Okay.
When
So he was a Republican?
no, he was Democrat.
Democrat.
Because Democrats held the
Senate,
for I don't know if they held it for all the first 6 years, but they held it for at least four of the 8 years. And he I think at least from midterm term one to midterm term two,
Yeah.
the Democrats held the Senate. So he got rid of the
filibuster.
the filibuster specifically for judicial appointments because the Senate rules are pretty easy to change. It's just senators and Senate majority leaders have been pretty reluctant to change them because
Right.
they understand that the Senate changes hands.
That's right, yeah.
and the shit could come bite them in the ass. But
Right.
for political expediency, and because he wanted to get two people,
He really wanted to get these appointments in.
Sotomayor and Elena Kagan onto the
Yep.
Supreme Court, and he didn't have 60 votes to do it, so he changed the rules so he didn't need them because he could do that. Mitch McConnell said this is going to bite you in the ass at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Midterms for Obama's last administration or last term
Yep.
come up. Republicans retake the Senate. Mitch McConnell becomes Senate Majority Leader.
So this is like 2014.
Yeah, because that ended in 2016. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so 2014 midterms.
Yeah.
Republicans retake the Senate. Mitch McConnell becomes, I think, the time frame.
Yeah,
But
Senate
anyway,
leader,
Mitch
yeah.
McConnell is Senate Majority Leader.
Yep.
Antonin Scalia dies
Yep.
while he's in the
Yep.
on Supreme Court.
Yep.
Quite unexpectedly. And Obama, and this is in the last 100 days of his presidency, I think.
Right.
Very late.
Yeah. Wants to try and get an appointment in.
Yeah. He appoints or he
Nominates.
Neil Gorsuch. Not Nielsen Gorsuch. Sorry, Neil Gorsuch was
a Trump guy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he nominates the guy who ended up being Biden's attorney general.
Okay. Anyway, whoever the dude is.
Yeah. Mitch McConnell says, he says that he's like, it's not appropriate this late, please.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
should
yeah,
need to
yeah.
see how the election term. That's the excuse
Yeah.
he uses, but
Yeah.
he did. His point was, I don't have to.
Yeah. I'm just not. I don't
just
want
not
another
going-
Democrat on the Supreme Court. And
Yeah.
I'm going to fight it. Yeah.
Right, and he was going to see how the election. Yeah, he was going to fight it as long as he could.
Just
And even if that was only to the election, because he didn't know what was going to happen with the election, right? Everybody, I mean, all the polls said Hillary was going to win,
all the polls did.
right?
Yeah.
So it was probable that Hillary was either going to renominate this person, nominate another person, and then he would have to.
Yeah.
They would
so it
have
was a delaying action.
It was a delaying action.
Yeah.
And then Trump won.
Right. And then everything changed.
And then everything changed.
Right.
So.
And so the positions get reversed and their position reversed.
And then
but the whole time
Ruth Bader Ginsburg
Yeah. She passed away too, didn't
passed
she?
away during Trump's term.
Right.
Right? That's why he ended up with three Supreme
Three.
Court?
Yeah, because he had Gorsuch, the guy who they accused of sexual assault.
Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah, Coney Barrett was at the end. Yeah, it was the last one, right? Yeah, she was
Yeah,
the
I think
last
she
one.
Yeah, I
was.
think so,
she was
because
the last
Kavanaugh was a hell of a fight.
one. Yeah.
So
anyway, it was the moral
basically with the same time frame, and then McConnell, who's still in charge of the Senate, he's like, wham, right through, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and
And
that's when it came to bite the Democrats in the
the
ass
ass.
because he didn't need. He
didn't need 60
If he had
votes.
50 plus 1, he had the votes.
What
right?
bothered me is the moral posturing on both sides. You know, it was the hypocrisy, and it just manifested itself in so many ways. The other thing was I saw a short clip of Obama yesterday. I found it very meaningful in that he's sitting there and he's saying, "Imagine if I, President Obama, had been doing the things when I was president that President Trump is doing right now. How people would have been eviscerating me." right? I try to imagine,
Yeah.
like just you
Fair.
yourself, Patty,
Fair.
you would be all over. Like
He was a very prominent user of, because he was after his first midterms, like every other president, you lose control of Congress in the midterms. That's a given. And Obama was very imaginative in his use of executive orders to bypass Congress, and he was eviscerated for it. He was, absolutely. He was pilloried for it.
Imagine how much more he would have been for doing the stuff that Trump is doing.
I think it would have been the same. The vitriol against Obama, I don't think it could have got worse.
No.
I don't know.
I don't think. I think like he was like on the conservative side. I don't think there was anybody who could have disliked Obama more. I mean, I think it's like
okay,
after a certain point, like Obama, like you just got to govern the way you got to govern, Barack, because you're not going to make any friends in the Republican Party.
let me take it another tack on this then, right? Nobody on the right is holding Trump accountable for what he's doing. Nobody's really speaking up effectively.
Not
about
in the
stuff
United
he's doing.
States, no.
There is, and we're not just talking about the economic, like the vindictive, petty politicking he's doing.
The revenge tour.
Yeah.
The only voice I've heard on the right which is critical of Trump is Thomas Sowell, where he's come out to say tariffs are a mistake.
Yeah, you see. So that the full interview comes out on the 15th,
Yeah.
but there have been clips of that interview
Yeah.
that he did.
On
with,
uncommon knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where
But
he's
there's-
saying that tariffs
I mean,
are a mistake.
You know, for a country that's all about freedom of speech and stuff like that, again, it's like what he's doing is he's punishing people for speaking out against him or having spoken
what?
out against him or following
what?
the rule of law. He's going after people who prosecuted him. Right? He's going
Should
after.
they have- okay, but do you don't see it as lawfare the way they went after him?
No, I don't.
You think that was completely legitimate? Like where they
As far
used
as I
the
understand
legal
this-
system to try and to block him from the political process. You think that was completely legitimate, above board, nothing to see here, folks.
So, you know, my cynical counterpoint to that is, oh, okay, so a guy who may have raped a woman and should be.
No, I don't want to talk about
should
Ted
be-
Kennedy.
should-
He's got nothing to do with this.
Should be taken through due process. No, that wasn't a fair.
No, that's Bill Clinton.
No,
No,
Ted-
Bill Clinton raped a couple chicks too while he was governor.
Okay, I don't want to talk about Ted Clinton or Bill Clinton or whoever. Let's talk
No,
about Trump.
and again, deflect. No, we're talking
but-
about Trump right here. And
Oh,
you asked the question.
sorry.
You asked the question about Trump.
Sorry.
Right?
Yeah, like
So, you know,
okay, you feel that was like
the-
you feel that the criminal prosecutions were not at all politically motivated. They were motivated purely from considerations of natural justice.
I'm not going to say purely. No.
But enough. Like there, so there was some political impetus in there.
Let's take that out of the equation, right? Let's take the politics out of the equation. Should President Trump have been tried, or ex-President Trump have been tried on legal merits for the things he was accused of? My understanding is there is evidence, and again, this whole apologism for
What was
Trump.
he convicted for? I know he was convicted of the campaign finance one.
That's the only one he was convicted.
Okay.
No, he was convicted of.
Well, you mean
of
the
rape?
Well, he wasn't convicted of rape.
Oh yeah, he was convicted of a real estate thing, but that was like I was reading some articles on the Federalist about that, and that was very creative interpretation. And if you hadn't have tried that in New York, there's no way you would have got the conviction. Like they had to jump through some real gymnastics to get that.
Yeah, the felony
Yeah.
counts were. I'm trying to remember because there was the paying back his lawyer for paying off Stormy Daniels one, but that wasn't the felony conviction ones in New York were the campaign.
something.
That was the campaign finance
yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
right?
And that was legit.
No.
But I do have a point on that.
No, that those like there he was convicted.
Yeah.
But those convictions are likely going to be overturned on appeal because the judge behaved abominably.
Okay.
And it was a judge. It wasn't a jury trial. It was a judge trial. And those, it seems to me that and the property values were all kind of intertwined.
Maybe the property value one is the one I'm thinking of.
Because there was one he was convicted of on like where there was like no victims.
Yeah.
Right. Because
I think that's
because he was like, oh
one.
yeah, he inflated the values of his
Yeah.
properties to get favorable rates on
Yeah.
bank loans and all this
Yeah,
stuff. And so the bank people came and said, no, we agreed with the valuations and
Yeah.
the money was paid back and we're all happy
Yeah.
and there's no victim here.
Yeah.
And they still convict him anyway. But the campaign finance was the 35 counts
Yeah.
of, which they had 35 counts of like some kind of campaign finance fraud. But the only reason
Yeah.
they were able to make them felonies because the thing was actually misdemeanor, but they said there was
Right.
an
Yeah, this is the
aggravating
one I'm
local
thinking.
charge.
Yeah, yeah.
They said there was
Yeah.
an aggravating local charge that made it a felony, but they never said what the aggravating
Right.
crime was.
Right.
They never.
Yeah.
And the judge was just, I want to convict.
Yeah,
literally,
I really
want
wanna convict him.
because
I'll find a reason.
the judge was
Yeah.
retiring basically as soon as the trial ended,
Yeah.
and he was very vocal about how he
Yeah.
basically just, I want to convict Trump before the election.
I
So he
also
was-
understand that.
so that those convictions are probably going.
I
to
also
poor
want-
guy. The poor guy.
Hold on.
Trump.
I also understand that this has been a repeated practice, like kind of exploiting those campaign finance loopholes.
Yeah.
Going back
Well, and
decades,
and it's-
and that Barack Obama did the exact same thing.
Well,
but traditionally, the Department of Justice does not prosecute ex-presidents on the basis that how does an ex-president get a fair trial?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the other issue is, of course, that that was Manhattan DA
Right.
Alvin Bragg that brought
Right.
those charges. Part of the problem with Trump campaign finance, anything campaign finance, is he self-financed that campaign, right? Like he's like, oh, this is campaign finance fraud. It's all his own money.
Right.
Right? So it's. Well, you didn't account for this money, right? But
It's his own money.
You're
Yeah.
right. I feel really sorry for the guy because
Well,
he's
I'm not
obviously
saying
a
you should feel sorry
stand-up,
for the guy.
integrous person.
No, I'm not saying
So-
that either.
so-
Like, no one's trying to defend Trump as some kind of moral paragon.
right.
But
So nothing.
What we're kind of
there's
saying
been
is
nothing
that-
he's been charged. It's all politically motivated.
No, no,
There's
no.
no reason
No,
to chase him
the-
down for
No,
anything.
I'm just saying the differential standard
The class-
of prosecution is problematic because what it looks like to me was it was lawfare, not intended that justice be done because a crime was committed. When you look the other way, like for example, with a real estate things, saw an article that Jon Stewart had done the exact same thing, and nobody was complaining about Jon Stewart doing it.
Yeah.
It's this differential. You're holding Trump to a higher standard, not for the sake of saying, hey, let's hold everyone to that high standard. It was, we need a way to get Trump out of the political process. So we're going to use lawfare
Yeah.
to achieve a political end.
There was the classified documents issue that he was charged with in Florida.
Yeah.
That had real teeth and real
Real merit.
merit.
And
yeah.
it got shut down.
and it got shut down.
See, and
But on what
so that
basis?
was the one I was going to bring up next.
But
What
I
was it?
can't remember why it was shut
I
down.
don't
I have to
remember.
Google it.
I don't remember.
Because
but
there
the
was,
issue
there was a Trump-appointed judge who was obstructing it the whole way.
No, I think is the Trump appointed judge that sent it to trial.
I
But the
couldn't
issue
tell
was at the same time they discovered that by the way, Joe Biden had a bunch
Right.
of classified documents in his garage and a bunch of classified documents in his office
Right.
from the Obama administration in his office at the Biden
Right.
Institute in
So if you
in Penn
prosecute
State.
Trump on this, you're leaving your guy open for equivalent prosecution.
Yeah,
I-
and not getting back to Hillary's emails.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, it just made it untenable.
So, and again,
Yeah, but that's not why the prosecution got shut down. It was I can't remember why
and
they
it-
shut down. But
okay, so again, for me, it comes back to the integrity of the right and the Republican Party.
But not
Right.
the left. It's okay. It's only bad if the right does it. Or it only
Well,
bothers you if the right does it. You're
No,
willing to overlook
no,
it if the
and
left.
again, I feel like that's deflection. Anytime I try to point out anything
Well,
about
that's
the
true.
right, and
Moral equivalency is a bankrupt argument. That's true. You're right.
I'm just, it's
And
just like,
Two wrongs don't make a right.
how far back are you going to go?
I'm not
right?
here to defend the Republican Party.
Yeah.
It's
got problems.
right. Like
Yeah.
all the conservative people I listen to, like the National Review types and Dispatch types, Jonah Goldberg, and
Jonah Goldberg, Kevin Williams.
They're done.
Yep.
They're done
Yep.
with the Republican Party.
Yeah.
They renounced their memberships. Like
Yep.
Goldberg and his co-founder of the Dispatch, Steve Hayes, were Fox
Yep.
contributors. And after
Yep.
Tucker
And
did
walked
his little
away.
documentary,
Yep.
they were like, "And you aired this shit?" And they fucking left.
Yep, we're out.
Fox.
Yeah.
Right. And Goldberg's on CNN now as a contributor. But
Yep.
these guys National Review, Dispatch guys, they're always have been from the beginning, from the second he entered the race, have been never Trumpers, right?
Yeah.
Had I been American, I would not have voted for Trump on either election, right?
Who would you have voted for?
Oh, I would just would have voted Libertarian.
Okay, fair enough.
And so again, it's this lack of there's a complete lack of integrity on the right in the States, and I fear for that here as well. And that's why I bring up the way Pierre behaves. Right?
So you think there is a clear moral distinction to be made, say between the liberals and the conservatives?
In that regard, at least within extremes. I am nowhere near claiming the Democrats or any one of the Democrats are squeaky clean.
I'll say liberals.
Right. Or
Like
liberals.
the Americans we can't affect, but say how it affects us here.
Liberals, that's why I bring up Carney as opposed to Justin, right? Because there's a big difference. And again, this is where Pierre shot himself in the foot. Justin is the problem. Justin isn't the problem. Justice
agree.
is the problem.
Yeah,
right?
He should have said the
look,
liberals are the
Justin's
problem.
gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
No,
liberals
but
are the problem.
to a certain extent, he was right because Justin was the problem.
Well, he should have at very least had a portion of his messaging staff say, working on the problem, what do we do if Justin resigns?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
didn't, right? Like they weren't able to pivot.
Yeah.
Well, I think because for
right?
the longest time, Justin was saying, "I'm not going to."
And to be honest, I didn't think he would.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, but I think you should plan for the
That's
possibility,
right.
Because
You got to red team everything.
because he's not resigning right up till the second he does.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
Like it's the same thing with CEOs or whatever, or company executives or whoever, right? We're 100% behind them until the second they're out.
Until the second they're out. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and this is
Because that's just messaging in the modern era, right?
Yeah,
like
that's right.
We're 100% for support. We're 100% support. He's fired.
Yeah.
so. Here's my perception of that. To a certain extent, I could go, why would I trust that idiot and his staff who couldn't foresee that possibility and hadn't planned for it? Why am I going to let them run my country?
But you'll trust the Liberal Party staff.
Do you think there's
Not necessarily. I'm just like I said. I'm an obvious point coming out of that, right? So do I trust? It's like that video that I sent. You say, you know, which brand of disappointment do you want to swallow?
The one that's
in
like
this
the
election?
one that we're going to point out 80 bad things versus the guys who point out 2 bad things.
Because I watched that video, I came across more from that same
The Australian one.
Yeah, they're all they appear to be Australians because
they are? They're based in Melbourne.
We looked them up.
They have a half dozen that are all about Australia, and one of them,
yeah, no, their earliest videos are all.
Yeah.
100% eviscerates the Labor Party. Now,
Yeah.
you're right. They do come from.
They skew left.
They are center left.
When you look them up, they are, like by all accounts, they are a left-wing organization promoting left-wing points of view.
I guess that's why I agree with it
Fair.
because
You are the left.
You are the left.
they are holding.
the entirety of the left. You are.
You are
left
the
in all its
monolithic.
facets.
Yes.
You are the monolithic representative of the left. You are
the responsible,
the embodiment of the
personally-
left. Yes.
I think anyone
On the Mount
listening.
Rushmore of the political expression,
Yes.
Trent.
Yes.
is
Trent.
the left.
The left. All of it.
Fuck, I'll take it.
But he'll be dressed as Robespierre.
Yes.
No, wait. I can never figure. No, Robespierre was the counter revolution, wasn't he?
Yeah, maybe. Anyway,
he was bad.
There's something I really want to ask Trent. Go back to Smith, and you thought that she was playing kind of a double game here.
Yeah.
You're not asking Trent. You're asking Steve.
Sorry, did I say
You
Trent?
said Trent. Yeah.
Sorry, I meant Steve.
You were looking at Steve,
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys.
and only to fuck with Steve.
Maybe.
Can I have a smoke?
Yeah.
Not
Let's-
yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Close the door, lock it. He's sitting there until I'm done.
Steve's asserting himself.
Okay, here we go. Let her rip.
Okay. So my conspiracy theory. There's no evidence, or no. There's a lot of assuming facts, not evidence here.
Evidence.
Right. That's no good conspiracy theory uses
Based
evidence.
on evidence.
So it's 2 things. Trump's 51st state rhetoric
Yeah.
is a negotiating position.
Yeah.
Starts with the whole country.
Uh-huh.
He only wants Alberta,
Keep talking.
right? Danny, knowing
From the meetings in Mar-a-Lago.
that Trump is interested in this.
Yeah.
Also, a Liberal victory brings on a national unity crisis,
Uh-huh.
is setting us up
Setting it up.
for an easy
He's moving pieces on the board.
moving pieces on the board. The problem is you can't move the electorate, and we have to have a referendum to leave
Mark
Canada.
Carney will do that for her.
Yeah, perhaps, right? And bada bing, bada boom,
Whoa, whoa,
2027.
I am
Alberta's the 51st star on the flag.
okay.
How about Saskatchewan?
Well, yeah, maybe, but
They'll
50.
come with us.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't imagine the mindset.
So here's my thing. I'm all about separatism.
I've thought
I don't
about
have
that,
a,
by the way.
I don't have a problem with that, but
You
I
what,
do.
sir?
I've considered. I've thought about, is that Trump's game? That he doesn't want Canada.
No.
I mean, there's a lot of downsides. Ontario, Eastern Canada, everything east of Sault Ste. Marie, the economics are moribund. Their industries would not exist without that border.
Yep.
Like there's no point in having them without the protectionism of the American-Canadian border. Their demographics are terminal. You would just get nothing but a lot of, you'd skew the Electoral College and the Senate towards the Democrats. This is not something Trump Republicans want. There's absolutely no economic upside. It's an anchor around your neck. It's like, hey, let's bring in a giant Mississippi into the Union.
Yeah.
Like there's no upside on it. But Alberta and Saskatchewan,
Yeah.
they do have upside economically.
And
they have upside.
also politically, right?
Yeah. Well, they're not going to hurt you politically.
Yeah, they're not going to hurt at least from the right, right?
Yeah.
So everybody, like when they talk about the whole country coming in, well, it's like, okay, well now it's 20 Democratic senators.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
Like Alberta at worst would be 1-1.
Yeah.
Right. Saskatchewan, I think, would probably be 2 conservative senators. Right.
So it's not going to hurt you, but there is a considerable
And there's a considerable
economic
upside in resource. And Saskatchewan, yes, Saskatchewan is important to remember because Saskatchewan is basically one of 2 places on Earth that produces significant quantities of potash, which is an important input in fertilizer.
Yep. And uranium.
And agriculture. And uranium.
No, it's not so much the United States needs that uranium. It's just that they don't want other people to
have
get
it.
that uranium. It's in a resource that they could control if it was part of the United States. So yes, I have thought of this. Thought that maybe this is a backdoor play.
Yeah.
That Trump might be running.
As we say, this is my conspiracy theory. So
Yeah.
So my thoughts on that are
Oh, do you want to smoke now though? Let's do it because I need a bathroom break.
fine.
So you go out for a dart. I'll see a man about a horse, and then we'll
I've
come back on
forgotten it all
those
already.
grounds.
You forgotten it all already? All right.
Oh, look at me pushing nicotine. Good God.
Yeah. You're a dealer.
This is the
I
problem.
don't need to read anything anymore. I need to write something.
Oh. You've done consuming, and it's time to start producing. All right. Well, produce your thoughts on
On Smith and Alberta
Okay,
separation.
so
4D chess.
2.5 things to say there. One is, okay, while I'm all about Alberta independence, it would be some sort of sovereignty like Quebec's looking for. Like
Sovereignty
I do
association.
not want to be part of the U.S.
I understand and respect that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm reluctant as well.
Yeah.
And that's the 1.5. The other point is I don't see the rest of Canada making that letting that happen, right? So and I'm not talking about by force. I'm just like politically, they're like maybe that's a wake up call to the rest of Canada, because to have this like BC being isolated like
Yes,
that, right?
it would be fatal to their economy.
Yeah, it would be like a great big fuck you to them and to the rest of Canada. So
Well, maybe not.
hopefully,
maybe not.
Hopefully, so okay, either they go across Alberta, whatever.
Yeah, like
But
if
they're going
if you
across
had-
the U.S. all of a sudden.
Yeah,
right?
like if you had a free trade deal. Like I think BC is affected primarily by road and rail networks, where their access to, like, BC is the entrepot for Pacific Rim imports into the rest of Canada.
Yeah.
So now they would have to get across the borders of another country to get their goods into Ontario, like into the Niagara Peninsula kind of thing.
It's actually not that hard.
An arrangement could be made.
No, the infrastructure actually exists for that.
Like I said,
But
Well, it does now, like our rail networks and our road networks.
no, but but because like you can just all those containers, you just run the entire train that's called in bond,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
we did that with trucks. Like
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
we'd load in Ontario and we'd be coming back to Alberta, but we always come back to the United States because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
shorter, right?
Right.
And so we'd get to the border and say, and they'd ask
Yep.
for paperwork, and they say, well, I'm just going through in bond
Yep.
back to
Yeah, and
which
the
port,
container's sealed.
and
You're fine.
and away you go.
Yeah.
And the train
So
goes.
something like that could be negotiated without.
But it's an extra impediment. It's an extra step, and
But
to
it-
do
yeah.
it, and you got to consider a freight train is
Yes.
2 miles long and
Yep.
has several hundred
Yep.
containers on it. So
And also, it now becomes a point of leverage.
yeah.
So now, when BC says we don't want Northern Gateway, the newly independent, we'll call it West Canada, like it worked for West Germany for 40 years. We can use it. West Canada says, okay, we'll close a rail line, or we'll close the Yellowhead, or we'll put a tax on when you try and ship through, right?
Yeah.
So it would become a point of leverage, but it would not necessarily be the death of British Columbia.
Well, like I said, it depends on whether we're talking being part of the U.S., which I vehemently disagree with, or
It's
a
definitely my
semi-autonomous-
second choice. Yeah, an independent Alberta and Saskatchewan, and maybe
Manitoba.
Maybe Manitoba, if they wanted to, of course. Like I'm not saying they have to. Like I think Alberta and Saskatchewan would survive without Manitoba. They'd do better with.
I think Manitoba
not
would do better.
necessarily.
Would do well out of this deal as well. Like I said, especially using Hudson's Bay. But now we have to split up Hudson's Bay. Anyways,
Yeah.
the other thing I was thinking about when I was outside having my smoke is just I think a lot of what I've been expressing today and almost every episode, and you joke about it, how I'm not really left. I'm not really anything. I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted with the state of politics. I'm disgusted with the state of society. I'm disgusted with the Democrats and the Republicans and the Liberal Party and the far left and the far right. I got no time for any of them anymore. Right? We need reasoned discourse, respectful discourse, in order to achieve things like good governance. Right? And there's just none of that these days. And nobody's got any integrity. Nobody's got any accountability. It's all just...
It's kind of like we have to settle for the least worst option.
Yeah, at all times.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly where I'm at this election. Like I said, I'm considering voting for any of the major three parties for different reasons. Right? And it's just...
Greens, maybe?
No.
No.
No. I loathe the environmental
Really?
sector.
Oh, okay. So not
Because
Greens,
they're-
not
they're-
NDP, not
there's-
Liberal, not Tory. Who's left?
No one.
Oh, okay. So you're just maybe thinking
It's one of the three.
You're thinking of maybe staying home.
It's liberals, NDPs, or conservatives, all for their own reasons.
Right.
NDP is actually the one I have least affinity for these days, but it sends more of a message. And at least they've got that foundation of, at least part of it is, trying to take care of the least of us, which I think is important for any society.
If I was an ABC voter, I would vote for the NDP in that same policies as the Liberals, but I cannot point to any NDP administration in any of the provinces where they've been as openly corrupt as the Liberals.
No, there's been one. There's one in BC that was horrible.
Yes. The BC New Democrats have...
They had one administration.
Yeah.
That was, I can't remember who it was. Was it Clark?
Yeah, but she was Liberal.
No. There was a Clark.
Christy Clark.
No, there was a male Clark. Premier
yes.
of
I think I know who
BC,
you're
and
talking about. Yeah.
I think he was the one. But then Van der Zalm was even
But
more corrupt.
he was an NDP.
I know, right? So it's...
Horgan, yeah, he had some stuff that kind of did not look good. The whole thing again this kind of goes into the whole Vancouver method and the money laundering. But set that aside. Look, say the Alberta NDP. Can you name me an ethics scandal?
No.
I can't. How about the current Wab Canoe government in Manitoba?
No.
I can't name you one.
But I will also note that I don't pay much attention
Fair.
to Manitoba
That's fair.
politics.
That's fair. But when you have a big scandal, it does make national news.
That's true.
So that's why I would say That if I was just ideologically opposed to the conservatives because they are conservatives, like say my sister is, I would say like, look, when
Did you say your sister's conservative?
no, she's ideologically opposed to the conservatives
ideologically
because they're
opposed.
conservatives.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what the policy is. She hates them because they're conservatives.
Yes.
It's a purely emotional, visceral reaction.
I
But
prefer
I would say to
call
her,
it dogmatic. I think
vote-
dogmatism is the problem.
No, because she doesn't really think about policy. But I would say to her, like, vote NDP because at least they're not openly corrupt.
Yeah.
Like they don't have a culture of endemic corruption the way the Federal Liberal Party does.
Yeah.
But onto your point, and something that's kind of onto yours.
He said, pointing to Steve first and then Trent second.
Yes, that's right. I keep forgetting. I have thought about that. Like, is that what Trump wants? Does he want to kind of cleave Alberta and Saskatchewan away from Ottawa in some, maybe if not outright independence and statehood, then maybe some different kind of regulatory environment that he can then influence? But I've also thought that for the sake of the midterms, when I look at MAGA type media, they're very aware that midterms are coming and that this is a big battle for them. When I look at the campaigns Trump has run, his primary in 2015, his first election campaign in 2016, first against Joe Biden in 2020, and second against Biden-Harris in 2024. On all four of these campaigns, they were not policy-based, they were ad hominem-based.
Yes.
In that he likes to he attacks the persona of an opponent. And he ridicules and humiliates and this sort of thing. He's not going to have that in the midterms. He doesn't have a single target that he can hurl abuse at. I think that's why he wants Carney. The American Republicans used Trudeau in the exact same way that Canadian Liberals used Trump.
Right.
They held up Trudeau as this boogeyman to say, look, if you vote Democrat, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
He's going to use Carney in the same way.
So if he doesn't have Carney as a foil,
That's right.
that's a problem for him.
You can't really do the same with Poilievre.
Right.
Because, I mean, you could point out, like, look,
'cause
the bad stuff that's happening in Canada.
Polyev is really what Trump says he is, and is
Right.
not. Trump is not and has never been a conservative.
But he piggybacks on that
the conservative
ideological platform.
Yes.
Right. So you can't say, well, look at Canada. They suck so bad. And we will. We're going to suck for years. But say, well, look at this guy. Look at all the mistakes he's making. Well, he's doing the things that you claim you want, such as smaller taxes, reduce the size of government, allow the free market to flourish, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Where he can use Carney as that foil.
Yeah.
So, like you've heard in the past, like the Liberals, like say in the headlines of 2022, 2023, the Liberals are running against Donald Trump, regardless who is actually in power or who is actually leader of the Conservative Party. Mm-hmm. The MAGA Republicans, the Trump MAGA movement in the midterms is going to be running against Carney. Regardless of who the Democrats put forward, they're running against Carney and the Liberals.
Right.
And that's something that I think is an undercurrent in that, I think the Republicans are willing to throw Canada under the bus.
Oh, sure.
For the sake of their own success in the midterms.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially Trump, because Trump is almost separated from the MAGA movement now.
Yes.
Right? With the people in the MAGA movement trying to look at the future beyond Trump.
Like, say, Ramaswamy.
And J.D. Vance.
Yeah. They're thinking long term, whereas Trump is only concerned about the next 3.5 years.
Well, yeah.
7.5 years.
What's that?
He's been talking about a third term.
Can he do that?
No.
Yeah, I don't think he can.
But
he's talking about it.
Mm-hmm. And who knows what's serious and what's not these days.
Yeah.
It's
true. With Trump, you never
know.
But
I can't see anyone like January 20th, 2029. Mm-hmm. That's inauguration or whenever that's the inauguration day. I can't see a situation where if he says I'm not leaving, he doesn't get frog marched out of the White House by the freaking Secret Service or something, right?
Yeah,
just
There's just constitutionally, it's just a non-starter.
in the army, right? Or
But I
whatever,
think they're like Trump's focus is absolutely on, and the MAGA movement, not so
Right.
much Trump, but the MAGA movement is absolutely focused on the midterms because they know their ability. They are up against the limits of executive power.
Well,
and they
that's
have to retake the legislative.
they're also currently trying to expand drastically the limits of executive power,
Sure.
right? In the courts,
Because they know
they're
that they're probably going to lose the midterms.
yeah, and they picked a bunch of fights.
Yep.
Specifically on immigration and stuff that they're welcoming in the courts because they think I don't know if I think they think wrongly, but they think they can win that will dramatically expand executive power, which
Right.
is what they want because they know they're not going to hold us. And the House is sitting there on their hands. Like House Republicans are basically they passed finally their continuing resolution to keep funding the government.
Yep.
That's all they've fucking done.
Yeah.
They haven't done shit. They've done
Yeah.
there's all kinds of stuff they could be doing to enable the Trump agenda since they're supposedly all on board and they're just not doing
They're
anything.
not.
Right?
They're not. They are the House Republicans are not MAGA.
No,
I think we are seeing a civil war within the Republican Party where the extremists of MAGA.
Well, the Civil War's been going on since
Yeah, it's true. And it's
the
going
first term.
It's going to reach a new phase where the MAGA guys say you are either with us or you against us. We are not going to
they've been-
tolerate your
they've been doing that for a while,
benign
but-
acceptance. No, they're going to ramp it.
Oh,
they're
sure.
going to ramp it
Yeah.
hard.
But
Yeah, that's only going to get them so far, right?
yeah,
Well,
it
I don't know,
depends. If they,
Unless they can get MAGA guys on the midterms.
yeah.
Yeah, but is the voter base going to put up with that?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
I think
but that's what politics is.
For
right?
midterms, the way the midterms generally go, MAGA is
Generally.
going to be a liability.
Almost always the sitting president loses the midterms.
Yep.
And he's-
Almost always.
Which means he's not going to gain any seats with MAGA candidates.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, well, they're certainly going to try. And that's what I think he wants
didn't
Carney for.
It didn't go well for him during the Biden administration. It did not go well in the
No, it did
midterms.
not. No, it did not.
The Republicans actually underperformed in the
Yes.
midterms during the Biden administration, even against what the polls said they were going to do.
Yep.
Right? They didn't do a good job of turning votes into seats, and they put that largely at the feet of Trump
Yes, he did.
when, he endorsed a couple of Senate candidates in Georgia who were both fucking batshit crazy,
Yep.
and the Georgians said no,
No,
and they
we're
voted
not doing
Democrats.
those guys.
Yeah, and then he supported Oz in Pennsylvania against John Fetterman, and John Fetterman has actually turned out to be one of the leading lights in the United States right now since he's recovered from his stroke, and he's
I mean,
he's definitely a center left
Sure.
guy,
But
definitely
effective.
center,
Yeah, but
effective.
Yeah.
And firmly on the side of the issues that we support. Like he's pro Israel, he's pro Ukraine, he's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
He's
But still,
he's anti woke.
Beyond that aside,
Yeah.
that's kind of why I think that's where I think MAGA is because his support for again we mentioned that he came out saying I don't like this Carney guy. It seemed really false.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Trump
it seemed
did it, yeah.
really false, and I definitely think they.
Well,
they
no, except
want
he
Carney.
didn't say he didn't like this Carney guy. He said, I think I'll be able to push him
Oh
over.
yeah.
right,
But he's definitely
want
trying
that
to
Carney guy.
he knows that his the association with Canadian voters is going to hurt Poilievre,
yeah,
and he's letting that go on. He's letting that happen, and I
Yeah.
think, okay, now why would Trump do that? And I think, well, there's advantages for Trump of a Carney administration in Canada. Absolutely, political.
to answer your question and to further to a point Steve made, Steve said, I mean, you never know how things are going to go, right? And I think that's a big part of things. I spent the whole first administration
Of
Trump and even more of this one so far, probably on aggregate, like in this 3-month period. Kind of look at this going, I'm not sure he knows what he's doing at all. I mean, the guy's a professional narcissist, right? So to a certain extent, it makes sense if I could credit him with that much strategic
Or
thinking.
foresight.
Right? I don't know that he has that. In a lot of ways, I'm just kind of like, and that might just be the best case scenario, right?
Might.
Is that he's just this loose cannon doing what he does because that's what he does, right? That's who he is. That's what he does. And we go through another 4 years of this, and then it's over. To the point about the third term,
Or
I
at
don't.
least 2, because his ability to do stuff will be deeply constrained when if the Democrats get a hold of Congress again.
We'll see, right? But
Because now he's got a supermajority, which, thankfully they have not effectively utilized,
well, he doesn't.
but they might.
But he doesn't use. Yeah, he doesn't follow the rules. Like he's and that's part of it. That's his narcissism. That's his gaslighting. He's just like he just does whatever the fuck he wants, right?
Well,
look
also,
at the
he
tariffs,
hasn't really
right?
tried to do anything
Oh my
that
God.
he needs the legislature for. Like tariffs, he doesn't need the legislature for. I guess you could say
It's actually-
his attempt to reduce the size of government, he has been blocked.
He actually has his tariff authority depends on his being able to claim credibly and Congress not challenging him on this
Right.
national security thing.
Right.
Right. And honestly, there's nothing to stop the House from taking that authority back from him.
Which a Republican, or not a Republican, a Democrat House is gonna.
Probably, yep.
So, like I said, there's not been too much he's needed Congress for.
Yeah.
Except like maybe the whole thing about maybe shutting down certain departments, like apartment.
Well, yeah, there's a
education,
problem. The problem with
USAID.
depopulating,
Yeah.
depopulating government departments, but not
Eliminating the department entirely.
or at least amending legislation
Yeah.
about what department does, leaves less people to do all these things that the department's supposed to do.
And he can't eliminate them completely. So that just means a new Democrat administration could just repopulate them.
Yeah, there's no durability.
So
about this.
he might need the legislature to do that for him. And when I look at the stuff that's coming out of, say, some of that MAGA media, like that's where Ramaswamy is focused.
Yeah.
That's why he left Doge, because he feels that this has to be done through the legislature. I do think that is the next wave of MAGA, but
Maybe.
it's not here today.
MAGA. If MAGA wants to grow, look, I'm like trying to coming at the conservatives. I want a less conservative. I'm like, if MAGA's got to grow, it's got to get its face pieces for like not Trump has got to be like not Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz.
Yes.
right. Like these people are
Yeah.
clowns.
They need
But-
more people like they need more people like Ramaswamy or Nick Freitas.
Yeah,
They need
and I'm
more
not
people
even
like
sure that
that.
Nick Freitas is really a MAGA guy. He's kind of just like a fellow traveler right now. But
Yeah,
I think
but
he's,
that's what I mean. If the
Yeah.
leadership of that passes on to those guys, it will succeed as a movement. Or it will have long-term impact as a movement.
And that's my next question is if regarding Nick Freitas, who is a guy like I watch a lot of his stuff. He's a really sharp guy.
Yeah.
He's a Virginia House of Delegates, so I'm curious if he's going to run for House of Representatives soon.
Who knows?
Or Senate.
Who knows?
But yeah, he's a good guy. He's a smart guy, but he's very effective user of social media.
Very effective.
Whereas like Marjorie Taylor Greene, there was a clip of her like
She's nuts. Or not nuts, but
well, she's a little nuts. But her problem, or the problem with her is you can't get rid of her because, like, when she first got elected to the House, she was the number 3 fundraiser in the House between behind the majority whip and the Speaker of the House, who was Republican.
she's kind of like to the Republicans what Charlie Angus was to the federal NDP.
Could be, yeah.
Kind of an embarrassment, and you really don't want him getting any headlines.
Boy,
but-
does she bring a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. And Charlie Angus was a safe seat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's there's a deal with the devil there, for your political organization.
Well, but like when sitting member of the House brings in that much money, there's not much that the
Yeah.
party leadership can do.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't need them.
She doesn't need you.
Right?
That's
She can keep winning her seat. She can keep bringing in bucket loads of cash. She can keep being a lunatic because that's what her constituents seem to want.
There you go, right? Same thing with Charlie Angus.
Yeah.
So, speaking to a couple things, one that came up earlier, and Steve talking about third term. One thing I read is what we should be watching for is April 20th, and not because it's 420.
Is that the leadership debate?
No.
Or not leadership? Is it national?
In U.S. terms, it's exactly 90 days from January 20th. When on the day he got inaugurated, he issued some sort of order that gave 90 days to create a report specific to what Steve mentioned, which is the national security crisis.
Right.
Right?
It was like the storming of Congress.
No, it's like
it's to do with fentanyl.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
Immigration
Yeah,
and
I
all
thought
that.
you
Right?
just-
When you
justify
said
tariffs.
January 6th, I thought you meant...
no, it's January 20th.
January 20th.
Inauguration day.
Oh, sorry, buddy.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
So
Gotcha.
apparently that report comes out, and some people are waiting to see what happens, because when that comes out, he may use that to curtail a whole bunch of whatever he wants in the name of national security.
Yeah.
So I think that's 2 weeks today. So I guess we'll have, we might have an interesting episode on that day.
Mike, yes.
Regarding, like, you were envisioning,
I don't
if
want
he
to talk
tries,
about that on the next episode because this is episode 48.
Oh, really?
Okay.
49.
49. Okay.
49th parallel.
Yep. 49.
Yeah. And I remember I asked you before, is
Yeah.
episode 50 the significant one or episode 49? And you both said 49.
49. Okay.
So what are we doing?
Well,
To hell with politics. What are we doing for episode 49?
Oh, jeez.
Since we're almost done, Trent's
Yeah,
Trent's hard out's coming pretty
we'll have
quick.
to figure that one out. After the election, I think we should talk a bit more about... Well, we might want to talk about Alberta separation after the election.
After the
yeah, but for the 49th episode, we'll have to figure
But
what
that'll
that
be
means.
50. That'll be the
But-
big 5-0.
Regarding,
But anyway, you're saying on the 20th, that report's going
okay,
to come
so
out.
that
There's
report's
something
going
else.
to come out. So he may justify a whole bunch of things. So, third term, I don't see him being marched out by the Secret Service. I see him, if he's going to go for a third term successfully, it's going to be because he runs again, which means he can run again. Or he's completely subverted the democratic process, which just means he just gets another term.
just doesn't leave.
Yeah.
Again,
but it's
Has there been any? Has anyone issued like a legal opinion on this, or like
I don't think so.
any
It's just-
constitutional scholars in the states?
Came up. I'm not even sure the context it came up in, but yeah, he said, "Oh, I like it. Yeah, I'd run for a third term again."
I've
whatever.
heard it a bit more emphatic than that he's looking at many ways.
Yeah,
Because I would think that there would be a flurry.
Well, it's
of
actually-
journalistic activity where people are, say, consulting professors of law,
Well, again,
constitutional law.
what do we have
in
to
the
pay
States,
attention
that
to?
sort
I
of
mean,
thing.
like, there's so much going on. Now, right now, it's all about the tariffs and the fucking economy, which lost $3 trillion. Right?
To be honest, I haven't heard the thing about Trump.
Well,
saying
you
this
heard it here
for a third
first.
term. Yeah,
you did.
I didn't. I wasn't tracking.
Yeah, no, but it is when they in the same constitutional convention where I believe they passed the ERA, and that is also I think when they put it, it's the 22nd or 24th Amendment, 22nd Amendment I think is what I heard this week is the term limit now. So
Right. So it's fixed 2 terms. That whether they're broken up or not.
yeah,
2 terms.
2 terms.
Okay.
All right.
Well, if that's what it is, then that's what it is. Yeah.
So in that
So
respect,
unless he can get a constitutional convention, there's no legal way he can stay in.
he would need a constitutional amendment.
currently legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, unless he does a bunch of shit on April 20th, which is why it's going to be important.
See, I will point out that this is something that I find really entertaining when I ask people to compare Trudeau and Trump. The concern about Trump is all speculative. It's what he might do.
Yeah.
and there's absolutely no look at what Trudeau actually did.
Oh, yeah, there
C11, C63,
There's
the
plenty
Emergencies
of it.
Act.
There's plenty of it.
Online Harms Act.
He was a
Online Harms Act, well,
bad,
63.
bad prime minister. In my experience,
The link tax,
Yeah.
in a deliberate attempt to censor the information space, going after people's bank accounts with the trucker convoy. This is stuff that he actually did. Like, it happened. And it's like, it just gets lost.
And the Mulligan Caucus supported him.
Like,
That's what we're calling the Mulligan Caucus.
the Mulligan.
Yeah, the Mulligan Caucus. Yeah, like Trudeau's do-over team.
Okay, so
It's
we're
like,
calling them.
let's worry about what Trump might possibly theoretically do.
No, we're seeing him do it, and some of the things you talk about, like going after bank accounts and stuff like.
What has Trump done to
is doing that
circumvent
stuff.
the democratic process?
He's going after law firms that have
That participated in lawfare against him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I mean by this is
That's not right. It's not good.
It's not good, but it's within the rules of the current American system. What rules has he broken? What rules has he changed?
Okay, what rules did Trudeau break by going after people's bank account? And we're not going down this
Okay.
road right now because we only got a few
I will
minutes.
go up.
Right?
I'll just say that,
you know,
my criteria is: what did he break? What did he change? Everything Trudeau changed. He created legislation to give him the censorship over the information space he wanted. You could say he broke the rules with the Emergencies Act, because the federal court did come and say, no, there was not justified in doing it. And he probably knew that, which is why he invoked it on a Friday evening after Parliament was already closed, and then renounced it before it could reopen Monday morning and censor him for it. So, yeah, Trudeau did break one major rule, and then he changed the rules to accomplish, his authoritarian ends. Whereas, again, I haven't seen Trump do anything. Now, I'm not saying I'm not saying he's not above it, or I'm not saying he's above it. I agree with you. He's a sketchy dude, and he should be very, very, very closely monitored and keep the powder dry. But when I compare the two of them, I just find it very interesting how so many Canadian observers are completely blind to what has been inflicted on us, and are like, Trump, 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 Trump all the time. Oh, Trump, 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 nah, Trump, Trump. Without looking, say, hey, let's observe what is actually going on with us now.
we have. I mean, like, and again,
Well, it's just that nobody cares. Like, Trump!
they do care, but that lightning rod has been taken away.
Well, if they cared, we wouldn't even be talking about the potential of a Carney majority. We'd be saying, are the Liberals going to walk away with 15 seats or 12? We wouldn't be talking about the potential of Carney getting back to government if people were actually thinking about how far we've traveled down the authoritarian road in the last 10 years of this governance.
Trudeau, the younger, was the worst prime minister ever.
Probably.
Right? I agree with that wholeheartedly. And a lot of Canadians were going that way. That's why the polls sucked before he went down. Before he finally stepped down.
But they say, oh no, it was only Justin. The rest of the party, we got no problem with. We don't mind. everything
Welcome
else
to the
that happened.
21st century social media age. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a lot of what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? And Pierre shot himself in the foot by focusing only on Justin. Right? We've seen that. Now, how it plays out,
We'll see.
God only
Well,
knows.
there's
right?
there's a couple of things, because there is going to be a leaders debate, isn't there? There's
Just
going to be an
not,
English one.
there will be an English one, not
Yeah,
French one.
he said he doesn't want to do French because he's not equipped to do that.
Because he can't speak French.
Yeah, which I think that's going to bring a lot of votes to the bloc.
I'm actually interested to see how that plays out as well. But so bringing it back, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, what's happening south of the border is a big factor in this whole.
Oh, totally! It's the factor. It's the entire Liberal campaign strategy.
But some of that is actually real,
Well, some of it, yeah.
right? A lot of Canadians are worried about the impact of this.
Oh, geez, guys! Before we go, give me your last couple of minutes on your thoughts on how this schism between boomers and everybody else. Like how boomers are really absolutely obsessed with Trump, whereas under 50s and particularly under 30s are far less concerned. Mm-hmm. How like millennials and Gen Z are like, they just don't give a shit about Trump. They're concerned about long-term economic issues. Whereas boomers that's all they talk about.
Well, the stuff I've read is like is more the schism is that the boomers are looking at trying to maintain a status quo.
Status quo.
Yes.
Because the status quo works for them,
Yep.
even though it doesn't work for people younger.
Yep.
Right? Boomers have their houses.
Yep.
Yes.
And they want their property values to stay high.
Yep.
Because
And they got their pensions.
they got their pensions.
They are largely immune from economic collapse.
Yep. So, like, I don't know. They can't take the shit with them, but they don't seem to want to leave it to their kids either.
No.
Eric Weinstein's been on this for a few years. He's like, the boomers seem to hate their kids because they're like doing everything they can to hoard their wealth and keep it for themselves and not share it with their kids and stuff. But
Well, I think that there's an assumption on boomers' parts that that they're not paying attention to in real terms. That those same things are in place for their kids, right?
yeah, maybe they're just completely don't understand. Like, I mean,
Like just how secure they are versus insecure.
how insecure their kids and their
Yeah,
grandkids
absolutely.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, part of me is gonna.
Do you see a long-term effect on this?
I don't know because a lot of. I mean, I see a lot of that youth out there as the batshit crazy woke left,
Yeah.
right? But I am also seeing those trends, like the
Yeah, the polling on
shows-
it trending very conservative.
Yeah,
right?
very
Like,
conservative.
yeah. Well,
especially, and so it's like the youth that are trending left aren't really youth anymore. It's millennials.
Yeah.
Right?
Or the older millennials. And it could also be that those batshit crazy wokies are a very tiny minority that just has the megaphones.
an outsized voice, and
Yeah.
we've always kind of maintained that.
Yeah.
But but even like millennials versus Gen Z and the new Gen Alpha or
Z.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Z.
Gen Z, yes. Yes.
Like, man, don't get me on ZZ. I'm not calling it ZZ Top, okay?
But this is exemplary of how millennials and Gen Z, they don't care about.
well, I think
And they're not terrified of American annexation either.
No.
they're not terrified of anything. Right? I mean,
Well, they don't feel that they've been raised in the era of Canada is a meaningless entity that has no identifiable identity of its own. It's a racist genocide state. It's if without immigrants, it would be a complete waste of time. It's not a real state.
Yeah,
it's not a
but-
real nation. This is the chickens coming home to roost.
Yeah, but
man.
if they care about that, they're going to look at the States and see it's even worse.
No.
Right?
They look and say, I mean, also consider that 20% of our population is only here because they couldn't get into the United States. That Canada was their second choice
lot-
of immigration.
Yeah, but not all 20%.
No, but a good chunk. And I
Some
think a
people
lot
come to
of
Canada because they want to be in Canada.
a lot of
This is true.
so yeah, but a lot not. And there's a good chunk of that population under the age of 30, and certainly under the age of 40, that is not terrified of annexation by the United States, where they say, okay, let's look at it. Let's consider it on its merits. Whereas the boomers react emotionally and say, no, under any circumstances.
I also know like a few people in my old job who from India, Pakistan, right? Because the old place I worked was probably 70%, maybe
South Asian.
75%
Yep.
South Asian,
Yep.
right? And I know 4 or 5 guys who said, fuck it. They sold their trucks and they went back to Pakistan, back to India. And I
Yep.
knew other guys, I've talked to other guys before I quit who were
Yep.
thinking about doing the same thing.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're like done
Yeah.
with Canada, going back to the old country.
We are seeing, and there's lots of articles about that, about
Yeah.
how we are
it's
seeing
like 30% or
reverse immigration. Immigrants come to Canada, find out that it's really
It's not the land of milk and honey.
it's on the edge of economic collapse, and
Yeah.
they're leaving.
Yeah.
That Canada is very rapidly becoming a northern Argentina.
Yeah.
And again, this factors in, like, do we want to entrust 4 more years of this kind of economic decline? But my point is that a lot more people that the key, not the key, but a big factor in this demographic divide is that the younger group, say under 40, does not consider joining the United States within Alberta and Saskatchewan, certainly, but I'm going to say coast to coast, does not consider the United States the end of the world.
and that they say, let's look at it. Let's actually look at it and do the pros and the cons. And they're at least willing to entertain it. They're not willing to say, I want to be poor, but say I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
They're not willing to make that trade.
No.
They're not. They're saying, I would rather be American with a viable standard of living where I can own a home, own a vehicle, actually go on a holiday every now and then, and not be a serf in a modern technocratic aristocracy.
Okay,
And
so
if that means I have to be an American, I'm willing to do that.
well, okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to close out with. We're going to close this up right away.
Okay. Maybe that's our 49th, the future of Canada.
Hold that thought. I am going to circle back to
Margaret Thatcher.
There's a role for capitalism in all this, lack of prosperity to the youth, right? So, that's a conversation to be had. The other thing is
Because we've had a lot of capitalism in the last 10 years, man.
It's very
It's been total laissez-faire the last 10. Oh, my God.
It is interesting because I've seen, actually, there was an interesting article this week where there were a bunch of young kids, high school kids to very early 20s at a job fair in Calgary. And they're all very worried about the employment market. And they're actually they're lamenting.
And so they should be.
What it's going to take, right? So, and that's the first I've heard of it since well before COVID. As a lot of youth have just been, coasting along and, not interested in jobs. And what I hear from employers in my, in the clients I deal with, that every single one of them is you cannot find good workers anymore, right?
Yeah.
The quote unquote kids these days don't want to work hard.
Well, there's even those competing narratives in the U.S., right? Like Trump is, loves these trying to bring manufacturing. The whole thing is about manufacturing jobs.
Yeah, reshoring manufacturing in the United
Meanwhile,
States.
Mike Rowe's like, hey, there's 4 million skilled trade jobs that are unfilled in the United States. So all you people who want to make six figures and not get into debt, here's a really great path.
Here's the way to do it.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like those.
Did you guys get my email on education?
Probably. And
We'll talk about
I
that.
haven't looked at it yet.
Okay,
And there was the one on French police.
Yeah.
So, 49th. Well, I mean, if we're making a big deal about 49,
it'd only be for us because we have no listeners.
and at the risk of alienating anyone who hears this,
Maybe you and I can get obliterated and he can watch. I don't know.
Yeah.
Teetotaler
Yeah.
that he is.
I'll drive you home.
on 420, no, I don't do that. I don't
He's
do
talking
that
liquor.
stuff. Oh, he's
No, I'm talking booze. I don't smoke.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
All
talking.
right.
He's talking.
I mean,
I
I
think
would try a
Get
gummy,
some.
but
I would.
We expound-
So just grab some Drambuie.
We expand on
drink.
fuck, not drink. You eat something I want to drink.
we can
Regimental
expound.
drink.
I guess. Fuck.
We can expound on the Ortona component of Radio Free Ortona, and revisit. I think it's all about the
Taggart's
regiment.
Distillery. Get some scotch.
It's all about the 49th Battalion.
We could do that.
All about the battalion?
All about the battalion. We could do
All
that too.
battalion all day.
Stole the virtues of Jack Binns and
The Mahatma Jack Binns.
hate on some of the others.
Oh yeah.
Just, who do we hate? Fucking lunch bucket.
And
No
Peacock.
names, no pack drill.
Yep, we're all gonna do.
Yeah,
nicknames.
everything's pseudonyms, eh?
Yeah, everything's
Everything's
If
nicknames.
you know, you know.
Yeah, but at the history of the regiment. And
All right.
Yeah, we could do that
That's
too.
an idea. Anyway, so this has been episode 48 of Radio Free Ortona. I have been Steve, he's been Trent, and the other one's been Patty.
Yeehaw.
Since I don't do intros anymore, because I keep forgetting.
Yeah.
it's okay.
ADD is a wonderful thing. Anyway, thanks.
For all of us.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.